to the reconvening,
The recessed.
Recessed.
The recessed meeting.
the recess meeting of last night.
So we are coming out of recess now.
We are now coming
Beginning.
out of recess and
Beginning our meeting.
Reconvening.
beginning our meeting.
Reconvening.
You're right. We are now going to go into a preliminary discussion, we're not voting tonight, on the town budget and its warrant articles. We're not taking questions from the public, we're not taking input. If we have a specific question for the town administrator, we will ask her, and she'll go up to the podium. But other than that, this is just the Finance Committee's free-for-all. So let's start with the budget. Does everybody have a copy of the budget?
Usually one of them start with three. The bond, so you start with the bond before the budget.
Well, we're not dealing with how this is going down. We're not going to a vote, so if we want to look and say, gee, I think I'd like to see this line done, I think it makes it easier if we went through the budget and said, hey, this looks good, hey, this looks bad. I think there's too much in this line. If anybody else disagrees, please chime in, but that's pretty much how we've always done it. Are you doing what? Waiting to levitate something?
I'm going to be quiet.
So, Laura, just
Yes,
to
ma'am.
clarify, the main focus tonight is the budget itself?
The budget and the warrant
Oh,
articles.
both.
And there's no votes tonight. This is
Oh, I
just
get that, yeah.
the discussion, because we've never really had that.
Yeah, and so for Naomi to know, to get feedback.
Yeah.
So, okay.
If we don't vote, how's she gonna know the feedback of how we feel?
Because we're going to go right down the line, starting with town officers' salaries, and people are, they're going to say, yeah, I like the salaries, or I don't, or gee, I wish we could redo this, some things we can't fix, but, as we toddle on down here. Keith?
I don't think she's really looking for us to tell her, this should be up, that should be up, that should be down, whatever. I think she's looking for, going through the warrant articles, and are we generally in favor of particular ones or against particular ones? And then,
Well, she also needs to know about the budget. Are we for the budget or not?
right, but that would,
But
that
there
would
would
require
be
some sort of pseudo vote.
Article 4.
Like a,
The-
doesn't mean
Yeah.
a formal vote, but a strong.
I mean,
vote.
I don't know how you can say we're for the budget if we haven't talked about the budget. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I'm sorry. go ahead.
My thought was, I think what Naomi's looking for is if we think the operating the proposed budget is too much of a difference, it's 2.7, whatever it is, I think what she's looking for is, what do we think is a reasonable number, almost working it backwards, like if we said 1.5 or 1.7 is where we'd like to see it get to, and then she has something to work from to say, now, from her view, how do I get to that? Or we could even give her a few dog biscuits that might say, we think you can get to this if you had this item and that item. Would that help? No.
I'm just looking for feedback.
I think that,
At the end, I might not be able to get there.
I just don't
Right.
think that we have ever discussed this.
No, we haven't, but that's what we're here
Remember
for.
that we don't write budgets.
No,
Okay, we make recommendations on the bottom line.
but some people have gone and made strong recommendations to other people in other sectors.
You certainly can do that, but in terms of what we as a committee do, we don't say, I can't support the budget because line 57 is too high. We say we can't support the budget, or we can support the budget because the total amount. If let's say, for example, the discussion suggests that the budget is too high, Naomi can figure out ways to reduce it if that's her want. We don't have to tell her to do this. Now, if there are specific items in there, the fireman's pay increase has been controversial. If there are specific items in there that are stuck in people's throats, as it were, no problem in mentioning that, but I don't want to take the time to go over every line item in this budget. That's not my job.
Okay, so what do you want to go over in this budget? Because my hot button is, there's a department that religiously has $100,000 in it every year and doesn't get hurt if we go to a default budget because they've always got that pad in there. That, to me, is a button that we could definitely reduce and make life
And
easier.
you should certainly mention that. That's something that sticks in your craw. But Bill, I'm sure, has other things too.
Well, Can I just throw something out there as an idea to, at least to, something that, I said I wasn't gonna talk, but I guess I'm talking. Quiet. For example, if we as a group said, gee, if you got your budget down from 2.7 down to 1.7% over what it was last year, that would mean you need to cut.
Whatever.
Well, I'll tell you what it is, it's 63.5 thousand out of the proposed budget. And that would get you down to where you're 1.7% above last year's proposed budget. Now, how would you get to 63.5? That's up to Naomi to look at. I give you a couple ideas. You know the two I already mentioned. You got 42 for the road reconstruction, 15 for the glass crushing, get you almost there. And then if you take that ghost police part-time secretary and put $1 in that line item, you're right there at 63,000. That's one example.
But the problem, Bill, is that if you look at all of the articles as a whole, we're at almost a 20% increase.
Yeah,
So just looking at the budget and saying 1.7 makes sense is
You can't.
not helpful.
After what we did last night,
Well-
we've even got less. Tom, you wanted to,
Yeah, I want to chirp in when I can. No, I concur with, I think Keith and Bill, you're kind of on the same page, and that is looking at the bottom line and saying, what can we live with, and then leave it up to the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator to make decisions in the budget itself. I don't know if I would agree particularly specifically on the amount, but the philosophy of what you're going, I think is where we need to go, and not to try to rewrite the budget. That's up to the town administrator and the selectmen to do. But I do agree that direction that you're taking there is,
I mean, if we wanted to get it down to say 1.5, then you'd need to cut 75 out of the proposed budget. And then, you know, besides the items, then you start looking at it again, well, that's where you get into, one example is what you say, you take a particular department, like the police department, and you say, I'm gonna find 12,000 in there somewhere. Well, we have done this other years, where we said, this position's gonna be empty during this year. So instead of my proposed budget saying if all 12 positions were filled for 12 months of the year, I'm gonna take something out of those. And that could be even instead of the 42,000 for the gravel, and if you want to leave that where it's at, then you go into there and you monkey around, because the police department, when I looked in the last 3 years, has not spent over, every year their expenditures have been under 1.4 million, and they're asking for 1.6 this year. So there's money there because positions aren't always filled, and they don't use all that. So, go ahead. Go
let
ahead.
him, he doesn't get to speak often.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said, except for what Lori said. But to address your concerns, I think it might be better to go through everything but the budget first, because the
Okay.
other ones are pretty much straight warrant articles that we probably have a good sense of whether we think or don't think. And then that would kind of help to address what Neil's raising, which is, if we do that, well, an idea, okay, what have we already done in terms of boosting the
Okay.
tax rate up?
That's fine.
And then when we get back to the budget, if we really feel like we've overshot on that stuff, but we like a lot of it, maybe it'll make us think harder about the budget.
As long, because we're going to have to do a lot of hammering next week. But if you guys want to do warrant articles first, that's fine.
Well,
Just so you know,
stick with that for a minute.
if we want a 3% increase in the town tax rate, which now
Who's
is,
decided a 3% increase?
I'm just saying
Okay.
if.
Okay.
You can substitute 5 or 50. But
Okay.
if you want a 3% increase in the tax rate, then the total is 431, up from 419 today to 431.
Okay.
So you've got a menu here as to what you can do that comes to 431. And that, to me, is ultimately our responsibility. How large a tax increase do we think we can afford? And then within that limit, what are the priorities?
Tom?
I don't think we could just discard the needs of the town because, and just look at it. I understand where you're going. I understand with your spreadsheet there, or your chart. But there are needs that the town has to address, and it might not come out to that 3% or whatever in order to address them. Also, if you look at the fact that when we're looking at the operating budget, the proposed budget and what it amounts to, we're talking about a percentage as compared to last year's default budget. And so, the department heads and so forth had to scrutinize their spending to come in with that default budget. So, that did become the budget once it was passed in that way. I understand that. But if we have a history of default budgets, then the percentages that we look at really, they're, in order to bring it back to where the proposed was last year, then it would be a bigger percentage. Granted, it didn't pass. We lived with the default, but I'm just saying that we have a history of these default budgets, and so we're always trying to catch up. So the increase always looks larger than
But
what
don't
the
you think-
needs of the town.
Okay, part of the charge of this finance committee, and this is for everybody to remember, proposed default is not our job to push a proposed, it's not our job to push a default. Each person can be excited about that, that's fine, and they can say, I want the proposed because. But the finance committee's job is to take the astronomical wish list that everybody has thrown at this. We've tested that last night with the schools. We're going to end up revisiting it because it's very, very high. And tonight we're just salad bowling the town to kind of get a feeling where we're going to go next week to do our first preliminary vote, and we'll probably end up massaging it again. But our job is to take that wish list that everybody throws out there, look at and say, okay, do we like this, do I not like this? And in the end, look at what the largest driver of income is in the town, which is not that high, it's roughly 75,000. And to say, this is what everybody's asking for. This is the pool of money for these people. What is rational to ask the majority of these people who don't have $300,000 as an income, $150,000 as an income? What is reasonable for the average taxpayer to foot the bill for these things? And if it is too big a bite for that group, then we have to sit there and say, how do we readjust this? Because the fact of the matter is, like it or not, even if we thought the town should have everything, and I'm not saying that, it should or it shouldn't, but at the end of the day, we can't force that on the taxpayers. At the end of the day, they're going to vote. And to the tradition of our taxpayers, from what Chris has alluded to, more often than not, they go default, default, no, 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 because they don't want to see large percentages. So I hear what you're saying, Tom, but we have to remember what we're weighing here. Go ahead, Chris.
I think the word wish list maybe has applied to a lot of things, but when I hear what each department head has said in defense of this, we have had so many default budgets that this now has become a needs list, and particularly a safety issue in a number of cases. So I think that when you say the voters, would say, oh no, we can't afford this, a lot of the time our recommendations are what guide them. And they need to know more about each article. I don't know how we get that out to them. They need more information.
And that's technically not, that doesn't become our job.
No, it doesn't.
And it's too bad that there isn't a job for it.
Anything that looks unclear. But some of these are safety issues, and we have kicked the can down the road to the point where the proper functioning of this town depends on a lot of these things. So we have a much harder job this year
Yes.
because of what we as a group and as a town have not done. So it may not fit 1.7 because we've had 16 default budgets. The school has had maybe 5. And when we get those default budgets, the next year's 1.7% is on a smaller base.
Neil?
But don't you listen to what voters are saying?
Well,
Why
I
do you
get
think
that-
we're getting all of these default
Well,
budgets?
I
They're
think that a lot
getting
of the
because this
reasons-
committee recommends them.
No.
Yes.
It
This,
is.
this committee reflects the opinion of people in town, and when we don't, we get overturned. So you may think that this committee leads the way. This committee, in effect, reflects what most people in this town think is the appropriate way to do things.
I disagree with you, Neil.
If we were to recommend this budget, the operating budget of the town, my guess is it wouldn't pass.
Yeah,
You got a crystal ball.
respectfully disagree.
I
Go
think
ahead,
you're
Jim.
overestimating the power of this committee.
I would love to, I would love to have the ability to tell everybody this is how they should vote. I wish I was smart enough to say that it was the right way to vote. But if there's a way that we can come up with a budget that is maybe not as high as it potentially should be, but it's a little bit higher and it's an easier pill to swallow, perhaps if we can get behind a budget like that, that we can, yeah, it's going to be higher, and because there are some things that need to be fixed, but if we can come up with a recommendation, then I think the town would go along with it for the most part. Yeah, it's going to be a bitter pill to swallow because your taxes are going to go up, but in some cases they have to. And so the question is, where can we?
Right,
How
but
can we?
the
how
one
can
thing
help
we
with
have to
that?
remember is if we recommended everything, I guarantee you, it's going to crash.
Yeah, and
The
I'm not,
average taxpayer is not going to go with a go on everything. They're just
No,
not.
and that's fine.
And we
Yeah.
have to show some sense of reasonableness because we're looked at as the people that are supposed to be thinking, how does it work? Are they thinking about how I feel? One thing I do when I'm around the town is I ask everybody I see. Today I was out filling gas tanks in anticipation of our blizzard. And everybody I saw at the gas station, I was asking, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Can you afford this kind of raise? And I wanted that because while I may think one way, I'm not on the committee to be me. I'm on the committee to try and give as many people a voice as I feel. I'm here to help listen for as many people. Go ahead, Donna.
No,
I wouldn't think that was a scientific sample.
yeah. Laurie, I'm agreeing with everybody at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I can sit here as a finance committee and say, I think it's a great idea, or I don't, or I abstain.
Right.
I get behind that curtain voting day. It's nobody's business how I vote,
Exactly.
and how people vote is
Their
their
choice.
business. And it's not me to sit here and say, everything's going to pass
Mhm.
or nothing's going to pass, because I don't know how those voters feel and what they want out of this town. And I have to agree with Tom, because I had someone approach me last week. I vote just like this finance committee does. If they don't recommend, I had only one person, again, but they said if the finance does not recommend, they will vote just like that. I'm sorry, but I'm telling the truth.
No, a lot of people
And that,
do.
and I think people
a lot
look
of
a
people do.
lot on us to do the right thing, like Laurie
I
says.
understand that.
That's why I would like to see us stick with the discussion on the budget for a little while, because to me, if we could come to agreement over the years on the proposed budget, it would be a great contribution to the town. I'm not saying, here's the proposed budget, let's pass it. What I'm saying is something that's similar to what's already been said. See what we can live with, and then turn it back to the selectmen and say, can you come back with us with this?
Keith?
Can I go back to what, I agree, but I'd like to do it the way Keith said. We come back, and then we might have an idea of what, now that we've kind of looked at the rest of the warrant articles, like you said.
Yeah.
Then you come back and say, now is 1.5 or something, because although we're not here to get a budget, to get behind a proposed budget, I think that this particular year, it's a good idea if we can work with Naomi and the Board of Selectmen to say, we're on the same sheet of music, because when I was going through the budget, this is a year where you do get the benefit of having the ambulance dollars go away. That's 77,000, because if that was in there today, your proposed budget would be up over 4% requested, okay? But there's reasons why in some areas, not all, of why that budget is going up. And if we don't get where we can get behind supporting a proposed budget, and we go back to a default, which is less, you're going to have things like Tom has said, where the salaries go back to the way they were in the default for the town administrator. That's a $14,000 difference. The police chief is another $6,000 difference. Avatar contracts, $15,000 difference. Fire chief, $10,000 on what the Board of Fire Wards wants to do. I'm not even talking about fuel yet, which is in everybody's budget. The prosecutor, another 17,000. Transfer station haul-outs that Benji was up here saying, this is going up, this is going up, this is going up. If they get stuck with a default budget this year, because we can't work to come out with something that can get behind the whole town to get this passed, I think we're going to be hurting more next year.
But contractual obligations do weigh in. The contracts for you and the police chief they don't get pulled out. Yes, no?
No,
They're,
they have to.
they're stuck with a
They have to
default.
find it.
They're-
Okay, so I completely disagree with Tom about his budget thing. These are bottom line budgets. And every year, default budget is higher than the budget before. Whether it was a proposed budget that was accepted or a default budget that was accepted. So every year, the amount of money that goes to the town, the budget, is going up. So to argue that they don't get the proposed budget, that's hurting them. It's specious. You could argue that they should be getting more money, but as you pointed out, you should be listening to the town. If the people are, and the people have been voting in school budget recently, not all of them, back and forth. When people are voting down the budget year after year, that should send a message that maybe you should propose a budget that's not so much larger. Yes, it's painful, but then you get it passed, and then you start on that path of getting them passed. So this notion that because it's not a proposed budget, we're wrecking the town, we're not. Everybody's will still get the raises, fire chief will still get his, whatever it is, and so on and so forth, and they'll have to make cuts elsewhere. There's no question about that. But that is, that's what the town, I think, is saying to the townspeople, are saying to the town.
Chris?
Yeah, James hit on something that I think is necessary for us to think about, and that is maybe the number we have in front of us is not the number we're going to end up with, but what is the middle ground that it takes to operate efficiently on a level that moves us to where the townspeople want us to go in terms of what they get for services. So maybe we should be just looking at can we come up with a number, it maybe not be 1.7%, maybe it's 1.9%, but whatever it takes to do the job that's less than what we have, just so that we can get behind it.
Well, I think before we go any further, we need to come to a decision. Are we starting with the warrant articles or the budget? Because you're not going to apply 1.7 to the warrant articles, and you're not, and you can't.
Chair.
So, first, this committee, all in favor of doing the warrant article first, raise your hands. Okay, so we're going to start with the warrant articles first, and then we will go wrestle with the infamous budget. Hi, Ricky.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I know it's great sideways.
Glad you came to play.
In the same box.
Okay, I am
Madam
not,
Chair,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
Just want to apologize for my tardiness.
Oh,
Sorry,
you're
work
fine.
got in the way. I apologize to the board. Thank you.
I'm not going to start with Article 5. I need to go back a page. Shall the okay, all right. Neil, I'm going to let you take over the reading of Article 3. You're so good at it.
We don't need to read these articles tonight. Everybody knows what they are.
Okay. How do we feel about Article 3?
This is the road paving bond, right?
Yes. Let's not all talk at once.
I favor it.
Oh, is that what you said?
That's what I said.
Okay, we got one.
Wow.
Yep.
I have a problem with people raising their hands. We're not conducting a straw poll here tonight. That's not the purpose of this. I don't want us to get locked in.
verbally.
You can change your vote, but how are we gonna go through and
Right.
analyze where we are if we don't get a sense of where we are?
So when, that's why Naomi's here.
Here's a concept. This is off to a great start. The people at home are going to be worried about us.
Well, put it in a different way. This was responsibly researched and responsibly presented, and maybe we can leave it at that. The voters are going to vote, and they're going to see that number, and some will love it, and some will say, no way, I don't care if my road has holes in it. So,
Just so everybody knows, there's no, as I said before, there's no cost this year.
This year, right.
But every year from now on, it's roughly $300,000+ a year. Now, offsetting that is if we don't do that, we are going to still have to pave these roads. The cost of paving will go up faster than the interest on the bond, the construction costs. We won't have the benefit of the roads during this period. So there are many, in my mind, many good financial reasons to bite the bullet next year and the year after and pay the $300,000+ in order to get the benefit of the roads now and avoid another factor which Benji mentioned, and that is some of the roads, if you wait to put the shim coat on them, deteriorate, and the shim coat then won't work, and you've got to actually reconstruct the road. So as hard as this is to swallow in terms of what it's going to do to the budget next year, over the long run, it's a better move than not doing it.
I'm against this, and it's a very simple reason. I live on a dirt road. He's taking my money and putting it in the operating budget. I have no vested interest in this. I go either out Tucker Hill or Oak Hill, which Oak Hill might as well be dirt road because it's such a mess. But at the end of the day, I'm on 77, 114, and I'm out. I do not spend any time chasing the paved roads of Weare. My life doesn't do that. So the roads don't benefit me. We have no impact fees in this town, so it's nothing to help offset the costs of the subdivisions. And to me, I would have liked to have seen if we have a third of our roads are dirt, gravel, whatever you want to call them, by moving the money into the operating budget. If you wanted this to pass, you would have kept that in this in order to keep people engaged, to leave them, I now have a vested interest to vote for this.
You're talking about the 42,000?
Yes, but it's all tied into this.
Yeah.
And if my 42,000 were involved in this, I'd have a vested reason to vote for it. But I honest to God don't. And at the end of the day, if you look at, we'll take example Bog Hill Road, Bog, but it is built on a bog. Bog, it's,
It's actually up a hill.
but it's a road that's got issues because it's on a bog. And, you know, it's like if you built your house on a volcano, you've got issues. If you build it on the San Andreas fault line, you've got issues. Are we ever going to be able to get rid of the bog to make this road a 100% issue? Nobody's given me that piece of information. How much is that one road going to cost and what's it going to come out of here? But at the end of the day, I have no vested interest in this. I think if you want to get this passed, you need to put the 42,000 back in there so that people feel invested in it and need to vote for this. Right now, I have no need to vote for this. Go ahead.
First of all, just a correction, Bog Road, or Bog, or however it's called, is mostly on a hillside. So it's not built in a bog. And I've driven it because when the issue first came up a couple of years ago, I wanted to see the length of it to see how much it would cost to actually rebuild the whole road. And it's expensive because I think it was like a mile and a half or something like that total. So you're talking $300,000 to rebuild the whole thing. So, you know, the other issue though is that as part of being a community and looking not only at yourself, and I don't mean as a put down, but I just mean it, you know, I live on a state road, but that doesn't mean I don't have concern for the people who live on Pine Hill Road, which is falling apart, you know, or parts of Walker Hill Road, the lower end of it towards Salmon Road is a mess. There are people who drive over that, and I may or may not have occasion to on a regular basis, but as a member of the community, my job is just as a citizen, to consider my neighbors as well. And so there are roads that I'm never going to drive or seldom drive that I know need work, and I support the work of having that done. As far as this article is concerned, my concern with it is I don't want to see us go through the budget and rule out everything else that has more than a 1-year impact because we know this is going to have a 10-year impact. That's a concern that I have. It's not that I don't see the need, it's not that I don't support the need, and not that I don't support the article, but I would just hate to have us go down through and say, well, next year this is falling in, so we can't do that. Next year this is falling in, so we can't do that. Because there are other multi-year needs here. Anytime you look at adding a position anywhere, it's a multi-year addition to the budget. And I wouldn't want to eliminate all of that in favor of this, although I do support it in principle and in general.
Phil?
Yeah, no, I'm in favor of the article because I went through with the CIP committee. Jack Dearborn and Benji did a lot of work on this. It's well documented. And they said, if we don't at least try this, we're never going to get ahead of the road situation. You're going to be, your paving money is going to be doing road demolishment and restoration is $225,000 per mile. Whereas if you can get shim and overlay, you get a lot more bang for the buck. And this allows you to get ahead of that game because we're falling further and further behind. So I think it's well thought out. And I don't think it should have an impact on this. Whether this gets voted in or not, it's not going to impact this year's budget. But I think it will make, if it does get voted in, it will make decisions for this committee difficult next year when we think about, here's 225,000 right there, or 200, about 200 and, more than that, 200 and.
318.
Yeah, 318, which is, I wanted to say about $30 per thousand on your, I mean, 30 cents per thousand. It's about $70 on your tax bill every year. On a $250,000 house is what it bangs out to.
For the road reconstruction?
Yeah, going out.
That's a big ticket item.
Yeah, it is, but,
It's
9180.
well, yeah, okay,
So,
okay, I think,
when does the DPW, we've got
I think
DPW garage bond and a school bond already that we're carrying, is that all?
This present year or next year is the last one on the grader,
The grader.
19 is the last for the,
19, so that'll be out of the
grader's done.
picture. So that adds 60-some-odd thousand dollars, which would almost balance out with the interest on this bond. So the principal would still be there at 250,000, but with the grader off the table, when we move into 2020, which would be the first payment, the interest would pretty much balance out within a couple $1,000s on the bond. So
If you're saying, so if I've got Neil right, you're saying it's $91?
this will add $91.80 to a person's bill, a tax bill. However, Tom's right, to the extent that there are other things that go down, it reduces this increase, but those other things that go down would, in a normal year, be used to cover the increase in the budget, and so forth.
And there's going to be other requests coming forward.
But don't-
Chris, you have something you want to say?
But the other point is, if we don't spend this money now, next year, there's going to be a request for $250,000 to do the roads. So we'll spend $250,000, we'll save the $68 in interest, the $68,000 in interest. But we're going to need $250,000 to preserve our existing roads and extend their life as long as possible.
On top of the 480.
Yes.
yeah,
Is
and
that-
On
have I
top of
got
the
that
480.
More money.
that was actually the
Everything goes
it
up.
Option
was
two.
Option 2.
And what would that be?
It'd be $750,000 a year with the present amount plus an additional amount, but you wouldn't be getting ahead as far as capturing this year's prices for materials. And you wouldn't be catching those yellow-coated roads before they become red, because you could only do, a smaller amount.
About 70.
yeah, that's,
Well,
okay,
the other
that-
question is
that's the second
stewardship.
item,
We
right.
put money into roads every year. And you don't get that money back if you let it fall apart. My road, Abijah, has big cracks in it now. That costs a fortune to fix that road. And as a steward of that road, Benji would like to put something on it so that we don't have to dig it up again, because we already spent the money on it once. We don't want to spend that money twice. That's what he's asking.
We're going to have to spend that money again, but we can delay that big expense for
Absolutely.
10 years or 20 years by topping these roads now. That's the
spread
whole
it out.
point of this. And we could do it year by year at $250,000 a year. But then in the fifth year, it would be $300,000 a year. The 250 would be going up each year because of inflation. Construction costs go up much more than 3% a year, 5, 6, whatever it is. So we would see that 250 go up. And we wouldn't have the benefit of the smoother roads during this period of time. And to the extent that we delayed, the roads would deteriorate so that some roads couldn't be saved with this top
A
coating.
bigger part of this whole program, though, that I did hear Benji on is, we don't know, asphalt just keeps going up and up and up. And whatever thing they make asphalt out of, there used to be a lot of it, and now as they keep refining and refining, there's less,
Sludge.
thank you, sludge to make
That's
the
what he
roads
said.
out of. And it's not as high a quality, or, you know, the sludge used to be thicker, last longer. Now, like everything else, it's like plastic
Yeah.
bags, they keep getting thinner and carry less. It's
Yeah,
kind of the way the
that's-
asphalt's
Madam
going.
Chairman, I think we've beaten this to death. We have a lot of other articles to do. Shall we
Okay.
move on?
Are you getting anything out of this?
You okay? Huh?
I mean, I think that's just gonna go to the voters anyway.
Yes.
Okay.
Nothing I can do with that one.
All right, scuttling right along.
But this will have a recommendation from the Finance
Right.
Committee.
Sure.
Yeah, but we're not doing that tonight.
No, that's my point. All of these will
Yeah.
either
We'll
weigh
weigh
in,
in, weigh or
recommend or
nay.
not recommend.
Okay, that would take us to Article 5.
No, 4.
No, we're not
Oh,
doing
we're
the
not doing
budget,
that
that's
yet.
after we have fun with this. Are we going to raise and appropriate $41,626 for non-union town and library personnel?
May I ask Naomi a question?
Sure.
Did that stay the same after the last board's meeting?
Yes. Well, we didn't really discuss after the public hearing much. You stayed for the public hearing.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, so there hasn't been a
It
discussion
hasn't
since
been a
then?
discussion. I'm just, like I said, I asked last night and, you know, just to listen to thoughts and see where you're leaning, not leaning, tipping over, or whatever.
So this is a 3%, correct?
It's true, yes.
The problem with this, as I see it, is not the 3%, but the fact that, based on a discussion the board had, this money would go to public works people, whether or not they get the dollar an hour. If they get the dollar an hour, they get the 3%. If they don't get the dollar an hour, they get the 3%.
And it would also
Go
go
to the
fire.
firefighters, and depending on contract, to some employees who are under contract. And there's although Jack Meany's argument was it's a relatively small amount, and therefore it should go to everybody, there are some people who feel one raise is enough. You can make an argument both ways on that.
I still support it. That's all I'm gonna say.
If you recall, I think you were at the public hearing, Neil, when I spoke, and I have some concerns similar to yours.
Okay, those of the people that were here that were not at the public hearing, do you guys have any opinions? Because Neil,
It's,
Tom, Donna, and I have a tendency to weigh in and be very consistent on, you know, where we're going. But those of you who usually don't, we would love to hear from you because your input is important. Don't shake your head, Neil. It's important to hear from these people.
I think we have a problem if this is a straw poll.
Can you address, Daniel, how you think we're gonna get any feedback back to the budget?
If we don't discuss this and everybody
No,
says
I
how
think
they
people
feel-
need to discuss this. I don't think people need to say, I support this because, or I oppose this because.
Right, but right now, we have the same people that go to the meetings, and it's the same 5 people that are weighing in. And the whole object of this meeting is to get this group to start talking, we're not asking them to say, I love this, I hate this, but I would like to hear from these people what they're thinking. I mean, they've taken papers home, we've had presentations, by now they should be able to formulate thoughts.
Yeah, I think that, again, Naomi looking for some direction to bring back to the board, two of whom are here, and maybe it's not a straight straw poll, but if we don't have something similar, they have nothing to take back.
She's got a puddle of mud.
I'm just, I mean,
And wasting everybody's time.
Is it supported or not supported? I don't care if you take, I don't need to know if it's 6-4 or whatever. Is the consensus that,
But if we can't talk about this and say, yeah, we like this, no, we don't, the woman has nothing to work with, the Board of Selectmen has nothing to work with, and there's no
Right.
point to have this meeting.
Right, I agree.
Just saying. So let's hear some noise, people.
Okay, if I may.
Please.
Okay, so the 3% raise for some of the public works people who are already getting grossly underpaid really isn't that much of an increase. Like the $16.50, you add like a 3% raise on that's 50 cents, $1 more than that. You know, you're still getting paid less than Goffstown. So, and that's
Yeah.
even if both of them pass.
Yeah, my concern is, I mean, I would like to say, okay, we'll give raises in both cases, but it means that in one department, they'll get a 3% raise, and another department, they will get an 8 or 9% raise. And, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly equal, but that's quite a spread. And if we include everybody in that Article 5, and then we look at Article 6 and look at the proposed budget, which has raises built into it through the Board of Fire Awards, then, you know, you do have that situation where that you have two groups that are getting what comes to an 8 or 9% raise, depending on what the lower pay means a higher percentage if they get a dollar amount, but that, whereas the person who is only included in this gets the straight 3%, and that is a concern to me.
So it's not so much the 3% in Article 5 that's the issue, it's the additional $1 raises that are
They
coming
get
up
their way
separately.
out of this, yes.
Yeah, and I have no problem with a $1 raise, but I have a hard time justifying it in both places.
So, but if you're saying it's basically one or the other, but it shouldn't be both.
That's what I'm
Right.
I
saying.
guess, is that correct?
There is a situation, though, I don't know how many years DPW had a contract that failed, but raises were given to the town employees and not to DPW. And so, in a way, that this would be an adjustment rather than a raise. But you can't put that in the language of the articles, so
Well, how
the
does
voters
that
don't,
leave the
you know.
people that work in the offices, other people that, you know, they don't have contracts?
But
they're
they
not
got
helped with
raises
this-
all those years, and DPW was flatlined.
But that was their choice. I mean, they were unionized at that time.
Right.
And
right.
they negotiated, and it failed.
But Benji was saying that now it has become a hiring problem to the point where they have no retention. So,
Yeah, I don't think we can revisit history, though, history lessons on when they were
no,
under
you can't
contract.
put
and
it in the language
I mean, I'm in
either.
favor of the 3% for across the board. I'm not in favor of the dollar. Because I think even now, when you take a snapshot today, the people in the highway department are gonna get the 3%, and then they're gonna get $1. But what about the people, ones that work next door and stuff? How come, what about us? I mean, it doesn't pass the smell test for me.
Yeah,
Keith?
I have a similar but kind of a flip position on it. because-
Tom, it's Keith's turn.
Tom's blowing me away here.
I'm sorry about that.
Let me finish.
Okay.
I support both of these. And I'm stunned that some folks who say, on the one hand, trust the people in charge, on the other hand, say things like, I can support one and not the other. They're different jobs, and they may require different pay scales. I understand you like to give everybody the same raise, but we're not. And you're giving some people huge raises, for instance. have in the past given some people huge raises. So I don't think you can just say simply, it's nice to say everybody gets a 3% raise, but if they're different departments, you got truck drivers versus office staff versus part-time fire people, and if you, Benji spoke to this, and he said that he feels they've already maintained his drivers, kind of like what they were hearing from the school boards, about teachers. That they need this in order to retain the people they have. So, but it wasn't a way that you just, I mean, it's fine that you don't want to do both, I get that. But to say that you can't do both because that's not fair, I think is not a very good argument.
Well, I'll also say, though, that, yes, he had 3 out of 12 turnover, 3 leave, but he also was able to hire 3.
Yeah.
So even at the lower wage, he was able to hire 3 people to fill those positions. So,
Now, for a
Are
while
we
though,
at-
Bill,
Phil staff.
that?
are you talking about highway?
yeah, I am.
They just hired the last one to be
Right,
We're gonna
right,
get
they
that
did
from
hire,
Naomi.
that's what I mean, they,
but it took a while.
okay. Well, it's gonna take a
Yeah.
while for other hires.
I
so.
think if you were to pull up an ad today, Ricky just showed me one. The town of Henniker is looking for a truck driver, and the starting wage is $20 to $22.50. That's right next door.
Doesn't help me, where are we?
So, $20 to $22.50 an hour. You can go right next door tomorrow and apply.
Okay.
We did lose people. We lost people. We keep people through the winter because the construction jobs aren't as fruitful and everybody. So we did hire the last one in December. But we did have 2 leave shortly after when the paving company started because they offered way more money, less benefits, but they went over to the paving companies.
What do we pay?
Well, depends. 16.56 is, so if you add the dollar and then you add the 3%, they're getting 52 cents. If you don't give them the dollar and you do the 3% on this wage, you give them 49 cents. So it's 3 cents. It's a total of $60 in the entire year for 2,080 hours. 3 cents.
I was looking at $1 an hour, you know, that 40-hour week,
Mm-hmm.
a 4-paycheck week, that's 160.
I'm just saying the difference between whether you apply
$160 a
the
month.
3% and the dollar. You
Yeah.
know, it's the difference of 3 cents whether. If you give them the dollar and give them 3%, it's 52 cents. If you don't give them the dollar, but you still give them the 3%, it's 49 cents.
Yeah.
We're talking pennies. You know, and you've heard the retention. You know, those guys are struggling for retention. The office staff here, I don't think I've had to hire anybody in a long time. They stay here. You know, we've got some long tenured people here. So it's the construction guys that are out doing the work. You heard it from the schools, they can't hire a teacher. You know, we struggle the same way on the certain skilled jobs.
Did you?
Just a quick question. Are most of our employees residents of the town?
Of the highway department, I think we have 2 maybe that don't. Might be 2 people that don't live in
The
town.
majority
But
are.
they live in the next town of Deering because they came from there.
One lives in Bradford.
One in Bradford, that's right. So
Most everybody.
most everybody lives here. Yeah. They're taxpayers too. So.
What I mean by the flip side of what was said is that if I were to go with one scenario, the DPW director came in and said, this is what I want for my people, I think that it would help. I have no problem with going with that. It's then adding the same people into Article 5 that is troubling. I can understand there being a difference because of the recruiting needed, but it would really,
Yeah.
to me, there's an inequity to include it in both
But the
places.
dollar for the DPW and the 3% still brings them to about 18, and New Boston starts at
I
1886.
understand.
So, I mean, Daniker's looking for 20 to 22.50 an hour to start.
I'm just looking at
Yep. Oh, I get it.
You
I
know.
just.
what I see is fair.
So we're just giving a sense of the meeting on each thing so that they can go back and listen, talk about what we said, so we don't really have to conclude anything
No,
about any of these.
she can take this, that Ricky's here, John's here, they're gonna go back and they say, well, in this article, they seem to be all over the map. On this other article, there seemed to be more consensus that they're in a direction. On this
Yeah.
other one, nobody knows what's going on with them. And that's pretty much what
So
they're
that's all we
gonna
have to
do.
say, is just, these, and they'll come up, this stuff is gonna come up at the deliberative.
I'm sure.
Somebody will raise that
Right, but
question.
we've gotta have a clue by then. Okay, so do we wanna move on to the next article if we toss this around enough? Okay, scurrying right along.
Article 6 is similar anyway. right?
Article 6, it's the dollar raise for DPW.
We kind of did them both at the same time.
Kind of did it already.
I know, but I
Okay.
don't want anybody to feel that I'm scapegoating anybody, so.
I don't mind saying I'm in favor of that, but you heard my rationale as far as it combining it with the other one.
I happen to think they need this. Nobody else wants to weigh in?
I agree. I agree with
Agree.
what Keith said, and I agree that they need
There
it.
she is.
They need it.
Hi, Sue.
Just sit here first, it's okay.
Does anybody else want to weigh in? Are we happy with where we are in charging off to 7?
What we're doing is
Okay.
just we're on Article 6.
Moving right along. No, we're going to 7 now, Sue. We've just scampered right through these. Article 7 is to hire 2 full-time firefighters slash EMTs.
No.
That's
Article
what-
7 isn't that isn't that the EMTs?
EMT
The,
standby pay.
Geez.
Standby
Standby pay is
pay.
7.
Standby pay is
8
8.
is-
According to mine,
I think they shift them around.
did you shift them around? I have,
We did from
One-
1/7 to 1/14, we shift them around.
okay, on 114, I have Article 7 on my copy. It says to hire 2 full-time firefighter EMTs.
EMTs. Mine too.
Have I got this correct?
Yes.
Okay, so
They did
Article,
switch them, yeah.
so let's deal with Article 7 as it currently stands until we blink our eyes and it changes something else. How do we feel about this? The fire chief basically said the same thing that the highway department is saying, they're having problems getting coverage. So where do people feel about this? We're having a hard time getting per diem to be here during the day because they have full-time jobs other places. They get paid higher wages. So we've got holes in our day coverage. And from the 10 to 7 shift at night, we do usually have coverage between 10 and 12. And usually from 5 to 7 is a very difficult time because people have to go to work and it's getting in to be a mess. But we're real sketchy between midnight and 5 in the morning.
The
We're
alter-
hearing that we have response times of up to a half an hour for somebody who's having a very bad evening and needs to make it through the evening. That's not exactly a great response time, but how do people feel about that?
In the, it's clear that Article 7 and Article 8 are alternatives. The fire chief believes that Article 8 is, I'm sorry, the EMTs is the better way to go, but he acknowledged that the standby pay is something that might work. He doesn't know that. Do I have that wrong, Bill?
Yeah, you do.
He said it's a
He
barely
he
fixed-
clarified last night he clarified, made it clear to me, those 2 articles are unrelated. If one passes, the other one doesn't anymore. They're unrelated. The EMTs are going to be hired if we hire them. It's step 1 to get to a hybrid and eventually where he's looking down the line where you have
8.
as many as 8 EMTs. Okay. Step 1 is to get these people. He doesn't know where they're going to fall into the organization yet. He may use them. He's got to get them trained up. He's got to get them familiar with where full-time hires. He'll probably use them to be somewhat supervisory during the day for the per diem people, so you have some continuity. And then as we get into next year, those people may be able to be used on certain shifts, such as overnight. He doesn't know how that's going to blend in yet. The standby pay is going to be completely separate, and that's for the people who are on call at night. okay? And if they don't
On
get
call for EMT type work.
EMT,
Everything's
whatever.
EMT.
Yeah, from 10 to 7, when nobody's sleeping at the firehouse. And if the bell never goes off, and they're on call for 8 hours sitting at home, they're gonna get paid for an hour.
Two. If it's
An hour for every 4
Yes.
that they're on call. Okay? And then if they're called in, then they get paid for the
Thank
regular
you.
rate. So the two are unrelated right now.
And something to just let people know, last night when fire was here, they left. There was a fire in town last night.
Yeah.
And
Lake Road.
our chief immediately went to the fire. He will adjust his hours this week, so nobody has to wonder whether he's going to go over his hours. He's very careful with that. But we had other towns that had to come in and help. It was not a good situation. Water was hard. We had a lot of tankering going on. And Ricky, are you allowed to speak to any of this?
I put the first engine in the driveway. I guess I got a pretty good burn.
I don't want, since I wasn't there, I would be a bad person to have this discussion.
I was the one screaming for water when the guys were in the building.
Madam Chairman, is this really appropriate?
Yes, because one thing we're talking about is, do we have people on target? How much are we relying on other towns to help us? We have a fire. It's much easier to get people in this town, even as volunteers, to come run for a fire. Fires are exciting. You're driving trucks, you get to wear equipment, you wave hoses around, and while people are having tragedies, the fact of the matter is, when people started getting involved in fire as younger kids, they have a certain affinity for fire. They just do. It's more exciting.
It's just adrenaline.
Yes. The EMT side is not so exciting. You hear the bell go off for EMT and you're like, how long is this call going to take? It's not that they don't want to help, but there's a big difference. So it is important for us to understand how many people we had show up in our area. It also they need to understand who's coming in from other towns, because backup from other towns, we cannot ever afford. And it's the same thing with Benji. We can't afford to go backwards to where we were 5, 6, 7 years ago when we had no coverage and the towns were fed up with us. So go ahead.
Yeah, the initial response was we got 4 of us in the fire engine out of the South Weare Fire Station, Country 3, for a call up on the north end of town. The fire engine that's in the center station did not roll.
Why
Did-
not?
No
Nobody's
staffing,
there.
no personnel,
Oh.
nobody to drive it, nobody to staff it.
I know, but
And,
why?
and this is this is the call group that was. I mean, our per diems were on staff. They did respond immediately. They did arrive, but the first engine on scene was one from Country 3. Shortly followed there by the Bow engine. The Bow engine was the second one in. As soon as it comes across as a building fire, they start what's called an automatic response, which is there's automatic run card. I think we get Bow, Hillsborough, Henniker, New Boston, Goffstown. And like I said, the Weare tanker was right behind the Bow engine. So it wasn't like it was, I mean, we had 5,000 gallons on scene within minutes of each other arriving. But slick conditions, we had somebody go down, had to go to the hospital, get checked out for a sprained ankle. It was, again, the ice and everything. We probably got, if you're looking for a total of Weare personnel that were there, 8 or 9 for a fully involved house fire, which it used to be nothing to get 10, 15, 20. But now it's just, again, and I think to put 4 in the truck out of the south end was substantial. Usually it's 2, 3. So that the per diem hours, the extended hours coverage would be for the individuals covering the ambulance and doing the fire calls from 10 to 7.
Now, did we have other towns bringing people in too?
Whoa.
Yes.
What'd you just say?
Well, paramedic isn't.
Say that last statement again?
The extended hours of coverage, I'm sorry, the standby pay. The standby pay
Oh.
would be for the EMTs and EMT firefighters that would be at their house, at the call force, like myself.
But I think we had a couple other towns come in for this that
Oh, yeah.
brought people,
Oh,
correct?
yeah. I mean, Bow filled their engine up. They had 4 come in.
New Boston
New
was
Boston
there.
came in. I think I saw 6 of them walking around.
Hillsborough
Hopkinton
was
was
there.
in. Hillsborough, I don't think the Hillsborough crew made it to the scene.
Okay.
But Goffstown's crew was up there. Dunbarton's crew was up there. So yeah, there was quite a few hands. I mean, it's hard work. It's definitely hard, physically, demanding work. So I was the one fortunate enough to drive the truck, so I'd sit in the truck, pull
There's
levers,
that drive the truck
pull levers,
thing.
and look for water.
Just as a fact, because I know we're not promoting, when we respond at that hour, when you said 4 came,
Yep.
our response and these articles are for minimum staffing to hold the line until a mutual aid call or something goes in. So this is just bottom line necessity stuff that we've got in these articles.
Yeah, the bare minimum for the state of New Hampshire to transport a patient is 2.
Is
You have to
2.
have two EMS
Yeah.
providers. And that's basically what, I mean, the original intent of the Board of Fire Wards when we put the per diem program in was to cover the ambulance.
So this isn't fluff. This is just bare minimum in these articles.
Yeah, and even during the day, I mean, if when the full-time, if we're talking about Article 7? 7, even during the day, if there was a building fire that struck, you're gonna have mutual aid, and hopefully, people are in town, still call members are in town to come out and assist. Because, 2 people aren't gonna make a very fast attack on anything. So, and it's not really, so you can't, one stays at the pump, one goes inside, that's not safe. That's cardinal sin, so.
So,
Tom?
just to remind people that for Article 7, that if it passes, that line 151 in the operating budget will be reduced by almost $39,312. And the reason for that is because it will be, these 2 will, full-time people will be taking up some of the hours of per diems. And so, if we decide to recommend this, then we know that immediately the bottom line in the operating budget is going to be reduced by that amount, providing it passes. And so, he said 141, if I wrote it down correctly.
It's in the.
I mean,
151, I think.
Yeah, I don't know whether he was using the numbers down the side or
I
the
don't know
numbers,
either.
That would be the EMT,
Right.
151.
I wrote it down.
Line 293 on the
the
Excel
account
sheet.
number or the number down the side?
Account number.
The account number, okay.
I think it's 290.
Thank you.
293,
290,
line
yeah.
293.
Neil?
A statement was just made that I want to make sure I understand. If this article passes, that reduction is made regardless of whether the budget approved is the proposed or the default. Is that correct?
It just says the budget.
Yeah,
Exactly, so regardless of which one.
Yes.
It's not just if the proposed is, if,
No, it's whatever budget
thank you.
they land in, that's where it goes.
$39,312.
$39,312.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he said that.
Well, he did, that's the way I read
He
it,
said
but
that line would be reduced.
Yeah, that
but he
line
said
will
that
be
line would
reduced.
be
On the
reduced in
same
the
line,
operating
so-
Yeah,
budget, and I want to confirm that it applies to both budgets.
I don't know.
Where did I get
Yeah,
the
it's-
line 151?
No,
Right
is
there,
that
if you
going to
look
be
at the-
listed
What
in
is
the
it?
warrant article?
I didn't get 151.
So the vote, yeah,
That came about
okay.
out of your corner.
93. Oh, I jumped
You should
that.
just sit up front because
No.
you're becoming a jack-in-a-box.
It's good exercise to get my steps.
I'm going to borrow my
The-
Fitbit so I don't have to.
The steps. It's the budget, whether it's proposed or default, whatever
It
we
is
end up
the
with is
budget,
the budget
yes.
next year.
Thank
But
you.
he did say that it would come from the wage line, and it would be reduced by that number is reduced from the wage line, number 151. So whatever we end up with, and this passes default or proposed, that's the budget we get anyway.
Will that amount appear in this warrant article?
It's going to, that came about Monday night, and we haven't, there's a couple of just other typos too. But that was one change that was made, along with on 8, there's gonna be a strike through on the last sentence. He said that last night.
Yes, they
So
pulled
8's gonna
that
have a
out,
strike
correct,
through, you won't see that sentence there.
correct. Any
Madam
more?
Chair? Yeah. So, in discussing that, that dollar amount in Article 7, did the chief go over what he thought was gonna be the proposed salary or hourly rate or whatever for those firefighters? in
Not
relation-
last night, but he did when he did his initial presentation.
And where would that be in relation to surrounding towns? I guess I
Still
just don't
lower.
want, do we want to get into a?
We're lower than
Do we
the,
want to get into an issue where are we going to be able to retain these two firefighters slash EMTs? Or are we going to come into next year and say, it's going to say, we need to bump these guys up just to keep them, and then we need to bump that up, and is that going to throw off that 5-year plan that he has outlined? I just,
can you,
my concern is, I guess we just don't want to run into the same problem as we're
right.
supposedly having now with the call
This
and the
is
per diem,
supposed to
even though it's a
help
full-time.
ease it. Are we going to be at the top of the pay scale? No.
Yeah.
We're going to be at the lower to middle end because, you know, we live in Weare, and Weare traditionally does not like to pay top dollar for things. At least that's been my experience and what I keep hearing. So if I'm wrong, I'll happily be corrected, but I don't think we see a lot of high-end salaries here. Tom?
Just, I think that what he was pointing out, that where the shortage is coming with the per diem people is that there's an unreliability factor because their full-time jobs are somewhere else. And sometimes they have to go in for overtime, sometimes they just have other commitments, and so they don't have the commitment that a full-time person would have. What he's running into now is he'll make out a schedule for the per diems, but then there'll be people calling in, I can't make it today, whereas that wouldn't happen with a full-time person. It would stabilize the block there. And so for the fire department, it's not the pay that's keeping them away, it's their other commitments that is keeping them away for the per diem people. That's the way I understood.
Well, it's that, and it is the pay, because the per diem people that have a full-time
They
job.
can get overtime at
They're
their regular
making more
job.
money as a full-time person somewhere else than they are as a per diem here.
That's right. So if they have the choice, they're gonna take their overtime in their regular department.
Comments, questions? Okay, are we ready to go to Article 8 regarding the standby pay?
I hate to be a pest, but I'm wondering again, now we've just discussed this, are the board members who are here and they're only gonna go back and say, this is the feeling that we get, or are they really right where they were last night or the last time?
Are you getting as much fuzz?
I'm no further ahead on Article 7 than I was 20 minutes ago.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think we kinda have
Nor am I
to,
any further ahead than I was.
even though we're not taking a formal vote,
We don't have to raise our hand, we can do it verbally, can't we?
Yeah.
You
just,
can change your vote next week.
Right.
Yeah, because this isn't a formal vote, but I do think we have to start giving some nods. I think you're right about that.
I thought that we were here to just try to see how we could put together something that will pass. You know, I don't know.
take my toys and go home.
On the next note,
I mean, seriously, if we don't give anything more than what we've given, what do they have to take back and discuss on Monday? You know, it isn't a formal vote, but if they say, well, it seemed like from what was said that 7 members out of the 13 are supportive of this article.
Right now, they have the clarity of handing them a bowl of oatmeal and saying, hey, figure this out. What do you see the Finance Committee doing? I think there's
milk's on
absolutely
top or
zero
milk's at the
clarity.
bottom?
What?
Milk's on top or milk is
Yeah,
at
and
the
that,
bottom?
so what did you see the Finance Committee did? I don't think we're saying we want to work with people. We definitely told the schools that, we need to hear what you want, and we're telling you that you're way too high. We're not telling this group anything.
Yeah, I mean,
And I think that's
like.
very not good on our
Why
part.
can't
We
we
need
just
to
say,
come in.
okay, as of right
Tammy,
now,
Tom,
Well,
Article.
I'm sorry.
The
Go ahead,
poor young
Tammy.
lady never gets in.
I'm sorry.
To be fair, the format with the school was much different. We
Yes.
sat with them at the beginning and went line by line through their whole budget and gave them feedback, and then they came back to us after the fact. It was my understanding throughout the whole process when they were presenting their budgets to us that we weren't allowed to give our comments or input. So now I don't know what the
Yeah.
point.
It is difficult. I mean, it's different when we weigh in with, and this may be something can help to go forward to help us next year. We don't get to weigh in hard and heavy during their normal meetings, but when we do a workshop with them, we come in and we attack line items. We ask them, where did you come up with this? What planet were you on? We don't really have that. We can ask a question at the Board of Selectmen's level, but it's not a good exchange, because it's almost like we're better than public comment, but not a whole lot. We need to have a more definitive thing, and I'm going to try with that tonight. So if you and Ricky and John, if he so feels, I think go ahead, Dennis, we need to have more clarity here.
So, I guess my thought was, Madam Chair, is if we just go through each article, and then we just go around the table, and everybody wants to speak relative to that article, they can also speak to whether they feel they're gonna support
Like
it
it
or
or-
not. It's non-binding, but they can speak their opinion, but at least everybody here can have a say. And if they choose not to say something, that's their choice to say. But at least that way they can at least get some feedback, some form, it's non-binding, everybody has their own opinion.
I agree with you, Dennis.
Let's take vote. Is everybody good with this? How many are for this?
I am. I'm not gonna raise my hand.
Raise your hands.
process?
Yes.
For the process.
Okay.
What Dennis just said.
Raise your hands, because we can't guess.
Clarifying.
I'm fine.
Okay, so let's proceed. Demi, you had,
I would like some clarity as far as what Beth was looking for last night.
oh, she's
Or
Naomi.
Naomi, I'm so sorry.
She's been called worse.
Like you,
Everybody
because
calls her Beth.
you had requested us to meet tonight so
Yeah,
that you could get clarity.
Right.
And I don't think that we're doing you or anybody any
Justice.
justice right now, because we're not. I don't think we're getting anywhere.
So
Like,
we're
it's
we're
been-
going to redial this a second, and
I was
Going-
just looking for some consensus.
yeah, well, now we're going to do some clarity, because we need to get a clue here. Going back to Article 3, we're back to the town roads.
I'll skip that with 0.
No, stay where we are.
It was.
We'll be here until
Yeah.
tomorrow.
All I need to know is, does anybody like it? Does anybody
On
hate it?
3?
On 3.
Love it.
Love it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, a lot of love-its. There we go.
Is that clarity?
Right,
Go on.
we
Go on.
understand that it can change.
Yep.
I'm just looking
Okay.
for a little bit of.
We're working on that. Skipping over to Article 5. This is the non-union town and library personnel raise. How are we feeling about this? And everybody gets it at this point.
Love it.
Good.
It's okay.
All right. So you got clarity on this one?
Well,
Not there yet.
I think you only got 3 people who
3.
clicked in.
No, there were 5.
Right here, 5. Go with
It's
5.
necessary. You know, you've got to do it.
Necessary.
Scuttling right along to 6.
Okay, I just, again, mine is contingent on the balancing with the next article.
Okay, but now we're on 6, and we have the dollar,
Next for the previous.
Pardon me?
You just mean say the next or previous?
he means that in the fire department, I think.
No, I think he's talking about 5 and
Both
6.
5 and
Yeah, actually, yeah. I'm concerned about people getting raises
Right,
in 2
but we
places,
beat that
even though they
horse to
deserve them.
death.
I understand the whole thing, but I think that there's a issue of fairness as far as people who are just included in
Right,
Article
but
5.
if we've had a lot of discussion on this, now I just want to know where people are standing,
Right.
because we've already beat this one to death. So
Yeah.
now I want to know, who likes this? I happen to like it.
Yes.
I like it. Side comment memo for next year. One thing I noticed that is the Benji's, compared to other people with similar supervisory and dollar responsibilities, I think we need to look at Benji's salary for next year. So file
That's
that.
their
That's
problem.
Yep. Well, that's what I'm saying, for them to file
Hear
that.
one.
Okay.
Article 7, back to the full-time firefighter
6 I'm in
EMTs.
favor of. We went over, did we say 6?
Yeah, we were at 6.
That's a dollar.
Already did 6.
I missed that.
That's not, but it's only
That
gets to go
offsets my
once.
no.
Okay,
Fine,
Article
sleep at the
7,
switch.
full-time firefighters, yay or nay? How are we feeling about this?
Seems
No.
necessary.
Yes.
I happen to like not dying, so I'm a fan.
I support.
I support.
Support.
I do not.
So majority seems to be supporting by a smidgen.
It's
I
that's a close
support
one.
it. I think it's going to be a hard sell.
That's their job. Article 8, back to our ever-exciting call firefighters.
For it, definitely.
Yeah, I'm for that.
Or, yeah.
Yes.
That's a good, solid one. That's real clear.
I got a good boy on that one.
Okay, let's move into a new and exciting article we haven't discussed.
Dogs.
The ACO. Comments?
No.
And you can move right along if you
I'm
have
not
no
a fan.
comments.
I'm not.
Yeah, I would be in favor of it, although I do agree with somebody who said that it probably should have been a raise just included in the operating budget because it's under animal control and not singled out in this way, but I would support it.
Well, see, I don't want this just going directly into the operating budget till we hire somebody, because that's just money they get to move around and use at will, because it's a bottom line budget, and I'm not a fan of padding budgets. So until we get a person, I'm not excited about that. I happen to think our officers, it would be nice if we had an animal control. We've always had one. This is a rural town, and half our residents have cows, pigs, goats, horses, dogs. They've got everything. Chickens, yes, and they all get loose, and
I think I've had them all in my yard.
certainly they go galloping down your road and mine.
They-
And I know for a fact that people's cows get out, and
Change the part,
that's part of living in rural. Go ahead, Sue.
Part of this was raising the hours.
Yep.
From 20 to 30. Is there that much of a need for an ACO in town, 30 hours a week position?
20 I would have gone for.
What was happening, and again, just stepping out of this role, but what was happening is that it was regularly going over.
The original position didn't have enough hours.
And so it was regularly going over that amount of hours, and that's why this was done, like, Naomi's
she's
an
kind of-
expert on it.
Are you, oh, you're
They're
coming
on
up.
call, right? It's an on-call position?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah. I think it was stated the other night that our police officers went to 323 calls
Yes.
for the
Yep.
dogs.
dogs and cows and 2 goats,
Well,
and I know horses.
Whatever.
It's not
I'm
just
saying the
dogs.
police officers are a high expense, and we haven't gotten any applications at $11.70. So the idea is to move it from 11.70 to 15 and go from 20 to 30.
And we only
hope we
pay
get
them when
somebody.
they get called and they go
That's
do
correct.
something.
And it's still going to be less
So they
expensive
can
to pay
work
the
up to
ACO
30.
than it
We're
is
not
to
paying
pay a
them
police
$50
officer.
Correct, yes.
per dog.
That is the object
That's
of the
it, they go-
exercise.
okay.
They're not going out and catching bad guys. Their job is simply to harness those
It's
creative,
when they're called.
yes. So I happen to like this article. I think we could free up our officers to go do real officer things. So how do we feel about this?
Fine.
Leave it, yeah.
I
Okay.
actually was more supportive of this one than some of the other ones coming later. Because I heard the 365. I did hear that. I'm not sure they had to respond in all those. I thought he said they had 365 calls for service. I don't know if that required a response I don't know if that requires a response by the officer or just a call taker that said, that's your problem.
Also, this is a cap of 30 hours.
Correct.
What has happened is that the criteria in the department has tightened up so that all of the calls have to go through dispatch, which means that the person can't pretty much be setting their own hours because it has to be a call that goes through the regular
Correct.
dispatch in order for them to respond to it. not-
Right, they just don't call the person at home and
Right.
out they go.
Okay, I'll change my vote. I'll go for it.
Okay, so this is a positive direction on this one.
Yeah.
Okay, Article 10,
Still
the
negative.
SRO. I'm a definite no.
Negative.
Well, we've
No, we
already-
decided no
We've already
last
said
night.
no.
Last
We,
night.
we've tanked the SRO several times now, so.
There are no legs on this three-legged stool.
And just as a footnote, when we write something up, I never could see how we could split this SRO among 3 schools and have that person fulfill the mission that was proposed.
You've heard of split personalities, we'll have a split SRO.
Well, we're not getting an SRO, so let's go to the
Okay.
next one.
Next one. Okay, charging off. We've gone to Article 11, and this is, where did we go here? An additional full-time police officer. I'm not a fan.
No.
We aren't at 12. I don't want to hear this. I want to see a whole new direction here.
Yeah, I'm 100% in favor of this. And we had a full staff up until just a few weeks ago. And
December 1st.
when was it?
December 1st.
December 1st. And the person left not because they didn't like the town, but because they could get a raise someplace else, and actually they're staying on as a part-time officer when they're not working in the other town. So to me, to not have any coverage, except perhaps a state police officer who's in Nashua someplace, from 3 until 7 in the morning, is putting our population into a dangerous situation. And I know it, and I'm not going to go through it again, but, you know, I've had experiences that have involved family members that, you know, you can't say you don't need police coverage for these 4 hours and rely on 2 troopers who are spread all over Hillsborough County.
Something to do with this article that people may not know. If you look at the hours and the shifts that our officers work, and we know that we have 2 officers that have military training, even if you added this officer, for what Tom's alluding to, there's no way we could handle that kind of coverage. We're not set up that way, and it would actually cause a bigger problem because of the way our shifts are set up and the people that go out for military and that kind of business. So until we actually were to see down the line, first, I want to see 12. I want to see the full complement work for a year to show that we actually need it. I want to see the calls. I want proof of everything. But the other thing is, then you need to show me how these shifts actually work. It's nice to say I would like this, but until you show me that the shifts can actually work and that there is going to be coverage here, 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 and here, until we have that, that has not been proven at any point at this time. We have not seen the call levels. We have not seen any of that. And until you have actual, you know, if Benji wants something, he shows me a need. If Fire wants something, they show me a need. I am not hearing any facts or figures on any of this, and the town has consistently said they do not want 13 police people. They keep saying they want 12. They're saying something, and I think we should listen.
I don't know who you're talking to. I really don't. When you're talking about number of calls, and when you're talking about safety services, whether it's ambulance service or police service, you know, it's not the same rationale as other departments, because if you need a cop in the middle of the night, you need a cop. If you need an ambulance in the middle of the night, you need the ambulance. If during the course of a week they only make 2 ambulance calls from 3 to 7, or there are only 2 people who have a domestic violence issue or a home invasion issue during the month, that's the way it is with police departments. You hope that you don't get those calls, but you got to have somebody there when you need them. And it's the same with any of the safety services. You need them. They need to be there when you need them. It isn't a matter of can you have do you have 16 calls during this hour on a regular basis?
Okay, can Bill weigh in a little bit?
Sure. I'll let you do that, Bill. Get off my carpet.
I don't support the article. We're going to go through a transition. Our old police chief is leaving. We're going to have a new police chief coming in. He may have a totally different view of how to use the resources that are in place to provide law enforcement protection in this town. He may have an idea that says, I don't need another full-time officer. Maybe I'll hire some more part-times and I'll provide 24-hour coverage for you. Mm-hmm. And that'll be a lot cheaper than just throwing another body at it. that may not give you any guarantee that you're going to have 24-hour coverage. I mean, I feel that in a lot of these additional police officer and even with the crews that are coming up, that new guy coming into town to run the show, let's hear what he has to say on how he wants to use the forces that we have in place currently to provide the best service to the town.
I agree with you on that. Keith, where do you weigh in?
That was my point.
Absolutely.
From the new chief.
Dennis?
Yes, absolutely, I agree.
I disagree,
I'm a
but
no.
I know I'm outvoted,
Yeah.
so shut up.
Any other comments?
I'm just going to, on a philosophical, I'm going to disagree with you. I think we as a town can make a decision and then hire a police chief that will work with what we give him. I don't think we have to wait for somebody else's opinion. I think we can do it as a town ourselves. That part aside, I'm still not exactly in favor of this, but for slightly different reasons than that.
So by and large, we're not for this?
No.
Except for
Okay.
me.
Is that clear?
Well, it's marginal. It's
Not if you're lobbying.
No, it's just a fact.
Tonight would be no.
Just a fact, that's all.
Okay.
Okay, 12.
Predominantly, you guys are just here to
No, that's fine. I just want it to be known that the collective bargaining agreement, as of right now, requires that 2 officers be on shift for 10-hour shifts. So whether you, like you said, I just heard you guys talk about the new police chief making a new schedule.
Yeah, okay.
The hands are somewhat tied with the collective bargaining that's in place for the next at least year, and if there is no contract drafted between now and, but when it expires, it carries on. That's the way
Right,
it's written in
but
the
that
language.
contract has been rescinded at a certain time during this year because of a situation that came up, and they were running one person on shift instead of 2. And the police chief actually acknowledged that.
But I don't think that would be preferred practice.
No, I agree with you.
Like I said, so the language of preferred practice in the CBA is 2 on 10-hour shifts.
Correct.
Okay.
So this one is, we're not fond of this one. Is that fairly clear? Okay,
So that was a no?
no.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a no.
Yes, it was a no.
Okay, leaping right along to Article 12. Weare Library, turning a part-time position into a full-time position. I'm going to stick my neck out on this. I think they can hire more part-time people. I'm not a fan of adding more full-time positions. They haven't had a problem retaining their people, and I'm not about to add another when we can hire part-time. Go ahead.
I believe when it was explained, the full-time position was going to be the children's librarian, and she does the programming and all of that, so it's not just get somebody in.
You have to talk to that thing.
It was for a children's librarian, so it's not just somebody who's checking out books, they're running programs and things like that, and I see the value in bumping her up to full-time as opposed to filling in with.
But she's been here 10 years from what I understand, and it hasn't been an issue that, Chris?
Yeah, it has been an issue.
It-
It's always been an issue, and we have a new issue.
We have a lot more programs.
And the new issue is that the middle school library, particularly since they moved the 4th grade, does not have the number of volumes nor the breadth to supply what the teachers want the kids to use for reading materials. So, and I don't have the number in my head. My husband tells me never use numbers because I screw them up. But the deal is that we are now bringing classes to the library. And the result of that is that, I believe it's like 9 that come over. The children's librarian particularly is impacted by this, so that planning time is taken up in serving these classes, and space is taken up by having the kids here and plus anyone else who shows up to borrow books during those periods of time. So the thinking was, maybe we can spread this out if we have one more day. I think that's where this came from.
So when the school tells me they have the library under control and they've got all kinds of
Sure.
things and they're balanced, this information is less than accurate?
What teachers told me directly was that they did not have access at specific hours of the day because there were classes using the computers and whatnot. So if a particular period was available to bring kids to the library, but there was a computer class, then they would ask for the Weare Library to serve that need. And librarians don't sit around and read books.
So maybe we could take the school library out of the school and just put it in the Ware Library and,
Well,
Oh,
it's
that's
a
also
need,
illegal.
isn't
So forget that.
it's a nice
But-
thought.
But there's value in having those kids go across the street to the library. It's a sense of community. I knew the fifth grade, but it sounds like it's fourth and fifth
Do research.
for the.
And 6.
Yeah, but is it just research, or what are we doing? Are we having programs over there?
No, it's to get books.
Right, they
Research
check
or
out
novels?
books. Both? Can they speak to it? They know the program, but.
They know, at least in my experience, it was both. It was what the teacher wanted them to get for that month. We're doing a nonfiction book report, or we're doing a book report of historical fiction, whatever that was assigned, they would come, plus reading for pleasure.
Here's my problem. I have a real problem with doing research with books.
Yeah,
Well,
Well, I have a bigger problem. I had research projects in school, and you know what my mother did? She took me to the public library. My mother did that.
oh, yeah.
I mean, the fact that we are taking them out of school to take them to the library, can they not do this on their own time?
But I think the issue here, just focus in, is to add an extra day of services for the whole community.
Right. It's a
You know,
Sawyer
this is
room
this
has
is a
meetings
side
and
issue of it, but
I
it's
will
to
as
add
well.
an extra day if the library's open on Fridays.
But it's mainly because of children.
Well, no, the reason that they want to extend the position is mainly because of what we just said.
Children.
Yeah, but you know what? That is true in the summer when there aren't any classes coming, too. It's a need. So that's how it evolved into this.
Children.
Yeah.
well,
Laurie, I'm okay with this Article 12,
Yeah,
Okay.
just
I
to
am
move it
too.
along.
I would support it.
I would also support it if somebody's in there, family who's in the library on a weekly basis. It's a community center as much as anything, and everybody can find something at the library if they want to go find it.
It's a nice place for kids to go.
Anybody over on this side?
Safe.
I'm just not convinced that what bothers me is having to have a full-time position now in there, another full-time position. I don't mind extending hours, but I feel it could be done perhaps with a part-time. So I'm not, I'm not.
I agree with
I'm
Bill.
not-
I'm not happy hearing that I'm going to have more
Because of
encourage
benefits?
shorts.
To
I mean,
avoid
it's benefits,
or-
it's
Yeah, yeah,
longevity,
yeah, the whole
it's a lot
follow-on
of
cost
costs.
that-
Well, maybe an angel will deliver a part-time person with the same skills as the full-time person who took
That's
10
already
years to
there.
build them up.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Anybody over here in the corner weighing in?
I'm mixed. I don't know which way to go.
I'm indifferent right now.
So we don't really have a handle on this article?
Well, I think the majority.
The more group over here is for it, I think?
I think we do have, we got a majority that kind of leans towards yes.
Half and half.
Yeah.
We're also
Donna's
missing
got it,
several
half and
people.
half. We're kind of like soup
Yeah.
bowl over on
Yeah,
this
so you don't
one.
get much of a read on that one.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Okay,
So what was the consensus?
half and
Half
half.
and half.
Almost.
Yeah, yeah, so we're gonna open it up for half-day Fridays.
Okay. Article 13. Police cruiser.
No,
I'm a no.
When,
just for the fact we're having our new chief coming in,
That's,
and he might want a four-wheel drive rather
There you
than
go.
a Crown Victoria.
they're
Okay.
they're all four-wheel
Right.
drive. You know,
well,
whatever.
the SUV.
all-wheel drive.
Yes, but
They're all all-wheel
But
drive.
still.
But it was when you look at the CIP, it was the out year where he started talking about an SUV. Even this current chief, who originally a year or two ago said all Chargers, now we don't know where we're going. So let the new police chief decide what he wants for another replacement. Because what they currently have is 4 Chargers, and occasionally they have to use one of the older vehicles to cover patrol. But you got 4 Chargers out there now for your prime vehicles, and they're all 2 years old or less.
And
So-
remember, the statement was
SUV.
we could
Yeah, we do.
let the SRO use it. The chief is going out on patrol with one of them, so apparently we have enough cars.
We came in, to run through the.
So
you
are
know
the
history of
consensus
it.
on this much is pretty much no?
So I don't get to talk?
I thought you just did.
Nope.
Go for
We
it,
know where
Tom.
you stand.
No, I just think that the original request several years ago was for 5, and as we've been building toward this, and I think we ought to complete what we started toward. My only thing that I would suggest to the board is to do what you've done in the last few years. If you get the support and where you're not asking to take out $40,000 for something else, you could consider doing it for this article. But,
The majority of the group, we are a no, correct? Okay, so you can take no to the bank. 14, no, yes, fire chief's car. Comments, statements.
Have you seen it? It needs help.
Yeah. He always gets tragedy cars from other places. Go ahead, Tammy.
I'm a yes. I think he needs it.
yeah, I am too.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
Majority is a yes. Okay, rescue boat.
No.
I'm a yes.
Yes,
Oh,
I'm
go
a
ahead.
yes.
I'm a yes.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
I'm gonna say yes on that one.
Where did I go here? Thermal imaging cameras.
Yes.
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 Okay, plow truck. Moving to a different department.
Yes.
10-wheel plow truck.
Yes.
We were using this as our litmus test the other night, right? How many
Yes.
plow trucks did we buy?
That's right,
That's the new standard. How many plow trucks are you going to cost us?
Two-year teacher's contract equals 3 plow trucks. That's right.
Well, Ricky, it put everything into perspective when you put it that way. So I'm a yes on this.
Yeah.
I like my road plowed.
It's a safety issue.
Yeah.
And we have to keep up, or else we're gonna be back in big repair bills, just in a different department.
One of them was broken down in the parking
Keith?
lot of this building. the other day.
Dennis?
Yeah, well, we had one with the axle fall off right in the road.
Right in the middle
Oh,
of the
good.
road.
It- This is
It's
a
been while.
yes, this is walking. Skid steer. We saw this once when Tim was the road agent, and it disappeared. It has reappeared this year. Comments, statements, loves, hugs, negates, what?
I'll go yes for
Yes.
safety of
Yes,
our people.
Mhm.
I'm a no because I'm starting to look at the pileup of the,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it isn't needed. It's been spoken, but I'm saying no because there is an alternative in this case, at a cost. You can get a leased unit in there for $1,200 a week or whatever, I'm sorry, I'm wrong there. I thought it was about $1,200 a week, and he used it in the first couple weeks of January, I think, because he had to. And that's a cost. But it is, you can get the job done at a price this year with the other stuff that's piling up. And
If you think of it as year-round, that's a,
no, he's got the old unit over there, but when it breaks down and you need the workhorse at the dump at the transfer station to get work done, and it was gonna be 2 weeks out of service, he got another unit, he got a case unit brought in there to do it. And the New Holland is back putzing around over there now. And hopefully Bill doesn't get stuck in it again.
That's why I'm voting yes.
yeah,
Options.
I would vote yes on this as well, because, it's a new piece of equipment that will last us many, many years. And the old one will be traded in, so it'll be out of the way, and we can start fresh with a new piece of equipment.
Unless Naomi can go back and say, bring us in prices on lease.
Tammy, you had the same question.
Right, I agree with Bill. There's too many things that are adding up this year, and I think that if they really needed this piece of equipment, they would have come with more options than just an outright purchase. They would have come up with ideas for a lease-to-own option or other avenues to find a replacement.
Yeah.
'Cause I did
I'm a no.
ask him-
We've got a ton of warrant articles, and we can't pass them all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just for information, though, the lease, Tammy, usually it's for something bigger than this $50,000 here. For example, when we had the grader, it was like 400 and some odd thousand dollars, so we did the lease to own, so we could spread it over 4 years, something like that.
Well, this
5
is
years.
70,000.
Well, but they've got 20 in the bank.
Taking 20 out of the capital reserve
20
fund.
out
and
of
transfer.
50.
Point that Benji makes, that's a valid point. You know, the fire department, it's easy to say yes, yes, yes. But
Yeah.
I don't agree with that, I don't say yes, 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 but you all did. Because there's no tax impact, because all the ambulance
Right.
money goes in, so he could just buy whatever the heck he wants.
Wants.
Now Benji, as we mentioned before, he brings in the same, roughly the same kind of money every year with the transfer station, recyclables. But that does not go into a fund that Benji can blow on whatever he wants. It goes into the general fund.
I mean, spend appropriately.
Spend appropriately, that's what I meant to say, I apologize. And he actually has been asking for this thing, not just in many, many, many years over the last few, many, many times over the last 6 years. Not every time, but.
How long have we had Benji? How many
Before
years?
him, it was what's his name?
It was Tim.
He started in
Tim.
2001, and then he had a brief 1 year, he was in Darien and came back.
Okay, because when I was here, Tim hit us with the skid steer 1 year, then he wanted something else. Every year it was a new issue. And then this to me is this only time I've seen this under Benji. This is the first presentation under Benji.
Well, he said somebody got stuck in it.
Yes,
Bill
that,
Straw.
that
Yeah, Bill
does
Straw
have
got
an
stuck in
issue.
it.
That's why he's looking at a
The
side
issue
door.
was that there were other priorities, like the grader, like the new backhoe that we got last year, that were more of a priority than this, and so now he's down to this.
So where are we on this? Yays?
We shall skid steer on a year.
Yes, still skid steer.
I'm a yes.
I'm a no.
I'm a yes.
I'm a no.
I'm still a no.
I don't know.
We're sort of split on this one,
That's
50-50.
yeah.
Okay, here we go with the Road Reconstruction Maintenance Capital Reserve Fund.
Mhm.
Does everybody understand what this is for?
No,
Okay, this is about, Naomi?
We're chatting about it right now.
Oh, okay. We'll come
Move on
back
to the
to
next
this
one. Come back
article.
to it.
Yeah, let's
Article
come back.
20, we'll cut right over to Article 20, the reconstruction and resurfacing of roads for $480,000.
Yeah, see, those two, they've got to straighten out so that people aren't confused by them, but the whole thing boils down to 480,000, which is what we've put in every year for eons for road reconstruction. What they want to do here is establish a capital reserve fund so that if there's
But we're on
15,000.
20.
yeah.
They're related, though,
they're
they're exactly the
related.
same
Okay,
numbers.
Okay.
Do we already do 19?
No, they were conferencing when we were,
No, they're conferencing on 20, I thought. Wait,
can, Naomi, can you wander up here and please?
I'm just lost as to where we are. Did we skip 19?
We did because they were bonding and we didn't know how long they were going to bond for.
That's a little much.
They were discussing.
Not for public TV.
Okay, backing up to 19. Do you want to give us a little,
If you remember one of the prior warrants, it was to put $1 in there, because we want to establish the capital reserve for that, because as Benji explained to you, the article of money disappears at the end of the year. He likes to leave a little bit of money in there just in case there's an emergency. So he's scrambling at the end of December to try to find things to buy, or else he loses it.
okay, because he
So
can't
the
encumber
idea
it for,
is to
encumber
do
it for a
that, but
project ahead.
what we were conferring about was the $1 became a repeat through Department of Revenue for the same article. I think if she had a better understanding, maybe we could probably eliminate 20? 20.
Okay.
I just think she needs to have a better understanding because it's so confusing. So I won't have an answer, but I'll be happy to try to get that accomplished.
That would be
But I don't
exciting.
for tonight.
It has nothing to do with the numbers. I hope we all can agree that we want to spend the road reconstruction monies.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's all we have to
Yes.
decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
It just is,
no-brainer.
it's way too confusing.
Let's skip everything.
Yeah.
Is the
Okay.
42,000 out of, no longer in the 480?
The what?
Okay,
Let's not worry about that. It's still in the budget.
Gravel and glass.
okay, right
As of
now,
last-
as of
It's not-
last night, the 480,000 also includes the 42,000 for
It's
gravel.
up in Article 4.
It's,
That's in the operating.
It's up in
that's in the
Article 4 right
operating
now.
budget. Okay, then I'm a no on this.
I think the rest of us
You-
are yeses.
Okay. I'm a yes.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is, yeah.
Okay, Article 21,
Consensus was yes.
That's a yes.
Bridge Improvement Maintenance Trust Fund.
Yes.
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 This is gonna be eliminated.
Yeah. Yeah, this is year 3 of 4.
That seems to be a yes. Article 22, an architectural survey for Quaker Street and East Road for future recreational fields and expansion capabilities. I'm a no, because
No.
I have seen absolutely no groundwork on anything, usage, how they use the schools, where we have problems, nothing.
I'm going to say yes on this one because the park has been looking to try to do various and sundry things according to their plan. We often come back and say, well, we don't want to do anything because they don't have a plan, and now they're trying to get another plan in place, and we're still saying no.
But what they're trying to plan for is 6 or 7 years down the road, given the
For-
year that we're in.
For the one property, but there's still, you know, the Quaker Street, there's additional properties
Oh, those
behind
didn't get on
that could be
CIP.
expanded into.
Would you please say something?
I think this would be easier to fly if it was just for Quaker Street than Quaker and East Road.
I have a problem with it because not once has anybody showed me the usage and the need. And until you show me how many kids, what this field is used for, how much are we using the school fields, and where the problem is, I can't buy that there's a problem. Just because somebody wants something, I need to see the issue.
And
Bill? Oh, Sue?
I don't doubt that there's a problem, but you have a point. Give a report, back up to your research like the other town departments
Yeah.
have done.
I'll only say I
It's
don't,
easier so.
I know when I sat in the CIP meetings, Jack Dearborn was saying the same thing back to Parks and Rec, like, I think you're trying to provide a solution where you have not identified the problem. This almost didn't make it out of CIP, which is very unusual, because they didn't have data they didn't have a foundation with which to say there's a problem to solve. And I'm not saying there isn't a problem, but
In all fairness, with this warrant article, I mean, I don't know whether there's a need or not, that nobody showed me that, but the other thing is, and we talk about it with, whether it's schools or towns, every year I see a different article for Parks and Rec. No article is ever consistently coming at us, like when we wanted the new town garage built, that was on consistently for 2 or 3 years. It took a break, and then year 5 we came in and really had our ducks in a row and delivered it. They seem to be all over, and I get that they may have needs, but there's no consistency with no plan.
And I think she had explained it as, we have a list, we brought this before the voters, they shot it down, we thought we'd try next year something else to see what the voters would let them start with. I'm just saying, I think that was her strategy. It doesn't mean that
Right.
what she wanted was not important. It's just she's trying to find what she
Yeah,
can
to
do.
me, if you want something, you keep hammering at me, like Benji keeps saying, I want plow trucks. I can't get you through the town if you don't have a plow truck. Consistency helps me.
Well, they have had a plan for, especially for Bolton Field, which includes additional parking and some additional structures there.
People
And
said
they've said no to both of those, and it has been on multiple occasions
Okay.
that they've brought up specifically the parking issue. It was just last year, I think, was the first year in a while that they hadn't done the
Okay.
parking. But again, that's to say that they don't have a plan is not entirely accurate.
Okay,
There
I
has-
have
there
not
has
seen
been.
a plan. In the
Yeah.
5 years I've been on the Finance Committee, I
Well, that's
have
true.
not seen.
We used that. We saw them last year for what he's talking about, Bolton Field.
Yes, for Bolton Field, but I haven't seen a plan. I want Bolton Field for this, I want a ramp for this, like we do with CIP, ducks in a row, showing me the
We don't
need.
need to go into that.
But anyway, you had something you wanted to weigh in on?
Nope.
No, you just, Dennis?
Sorry, Karen, I'm a no on this. Karen's a good friend of mine, so
Oh, okay.
Karen's
so
starting.
I'm gonna take some heat on that. In her defense, I think that for the time and the money that she is allotted and paid,
Mhm.
I don't think that she really has either the ability or the time to really set forth a full plan and proposal. I mean, she has a hard enough time with the money that she's allotted just to get hire staff for Chase Park. So I think she's leaving at the end of this year. I think going forward, I think Parks and Rec is probably going to have to look at that in terms of, you know, what their overall strategy is. And whoever takes over is going to have to really kind of take a look at that broad spectrum. And, you know, it may be that that position gets expanded other than part-time. So, I'm not
Is she
saying
paid?
full-time.
Yes,
She's
she is.
paid, but it's,
A stipend.
Just a
Okay.
stipend, it's
It's
like 5,000.
A little under 5,000.
yeah, it's 5,000.
Yeah.
And I can attest to the fact that, you know, just her running Chase Park is probably
Yeah.
takes up
A lot of time.
Yeah,
80+% of that. So-
I can't support it either, even though I hate to see Parks and Rec turned down year after year. But this, pardon me?
We got the bathhouse. They got turned down.
Yeah, we did the bathrooms.
Well, that's good.
We did.
The area up on East Road, you really don't need anybody to tell you it's gonna be a long time before you can turn that into an athletic field. You know, it's still all rocks and gravel and hillside and, you know. The other one, I think probably you could get some idea of it, even with local people as volunteers, to see whether or not to proceed and go to the study area or mapping it out for an actual athletic field. It doesn't hold together for me right now. And again, I really hate to say that because I know that if I were in Karen's shoes, I would feel like, my God, what do I have to do to get something approved? But
So where are we sitting? Mostly no's?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Ricky, we're no's.
Thank you.
It was a long road on a small item.
Where did I lose these people?
We're on
23
Article
is on
23,
roof.
Oh, wrong page.
Government Building
I
Maintenance,
was already leaving.
Safety Complex Roof.
All right, safety complex roof, $66,500.
I'm a yes.
yes.
Yes,
Pretty cut and dried.
yes.
Save the 5-gallon buckets for later.
5-gallon bucket.
Get them umbrellas. Okay, Article 24 is gone, correct?
Yes.
What was the decision on 23?
Yes.
Yes.
The tentative
Well,
decision.
no, it's good because we're
Blue
going to
tarps
discuss
up
it.
there.
Article 25, we are, the cemetery, this doesn't matter because it comes out of the cypre,
Cypre.
whatever, so it's not an issue to us. Fireworks, I like fireworks, so I always say yes.
Community.
We like fireworks too, they're good.
I'm on the committee, so I'll abstain.
Yeah,
I don't
you'd
want
be in
nobody-
trouble if you went the wrong way,
I
wouldn't
would,
you?
you know.
Is that the right figure? Where did I see 7,000?
On the tally sheet that Neil did, he rounded it up.
Oh, okay, so the 6,500 is the right number for the warrant article.
So where are we on fireworks?
No. I
Yes,
still count
Everybody in
the
yes?
yes, yes.
Yeah, let the voters
Yes.
decide.
Majority yes. Okay, charging here, where did we go? Forestry, the conservation, that's nothing up to us, so those 27 and 28 don't have any impact to us. 29 and 30, have we found out if they're legal first?
Again, it
Well, you
doesn't
said you
really-
didn't know if you could do these or not, you were checking with the attorney.
With the last one, petition is going on, yes, as it was written.
No, I mean, originally you weren't sure if you could,
The auction property.
Yeah,
property? They're both good, there's no,
I was never questioning why.
okay, I
Do
wasn't.
we don't recommend or not recommend?
That's right, there's no monetary.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have nothing to do with that.
There better be.
And,
Well, right, at the end of the day, maybe, yeah.
in Article 31, we have no vote on, it's simply monetary. Now,
Who's running the show over there?
Neil, I'm going to ask you, while you hide out over there, for the next meeting, you did a wonderful sheet for our last meeting that showed if everything passed, where it went, yada, yada, yada. You're keeping track of what we're kind of thrilled for and what we're not. We're going to need the full tax impact, because I think when we actually look at what we're all for and what we think would be really neat, we're going to have a reality check and dial it back down, because there's no way we can load at the expense. What we've loaded with the schools is already extremely high, and,
He's not listening to you.
I'm sorry, he's listening. He's got ears. So we're going to need that from Neil.
Yeah.
Do we have
I did-
minutes
I did
that you
think
want?
that you said earlier that if somebody
You're gonna go back to the budget.
isn't involved, they're not involved.
Sorry.
Are we going back to?
Well, he's not talking.
Where's my budget that
I'm just directing and,
Pouting.
yeah, well, I didn't say that.
I did.
All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
sorry.
please, Dennis.
Just, that Article 31, I know it doesn't have anything to do monetarily, but that was supposed to be clarified. Is that going to be still on there as a clear?
The attorney said that I put it on just like it's written.
Just
like
as
it's
written.
Just as written?
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
It is gonna be advisory only.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Do you have any more, want to say anything, since this is our time to bond with
I
you?
thought you were going back to 4.
Yeah, budget.
We haven't done the budget yet, no, we
I
haven't.
just wanted your dollar amount, I didn't write it down, $4 or something. I think you mentioned them.
For the whole budget?
So last
reduction?
year's budget was
Oh.
$4 and something. If it all passes, I don't know if you
Yeah,
It was
for last year,
419.
419, I believe is the magic number.
Oh, my God. We have way too much crap. Yep.
Here.
Okay. Does anybody want to discuss the budget so we can give her give them a bigger salad to work with?
I found a few things and let them take some of these things out, mostly.
Hang on a second, Chris. Keith, do you guys want to participate
I'm
up
gonna try
here?
to give you the answer you're looking for right now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Oh, well, let's wait for Keith then.
They're going out to go figure out what we're doing, so go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to say what to take out, but there's some tweakable places here that they can look at. And largely, they're in places where it wasn't expended last year.
Can I interrupt you 1 second? I would like the committee to weigh in on this. We are a committee, and we're supposed to all be committeeing together. And I appreciate that people are trying to get us information, but right now, we're supposed to be discussing. How do we feel about two being out in the hallway while we're trying to do business here?
Same thing I felt about somebody hiding behind a refrigerator all last year
What refrigerator?
upstairs.
Yeah.
There's no
It would be nice
refrigerator
if-
up there.
It would be nice if everybody heard the same things at the same time.
Excuse me for
Are
one
they
moment.
trying to get the percentage?
Yes, but that can be done later.
Let me just quickly see.
Excuse me.
Guess you guys' refrigerator is a little like dormitory.
You can have a seventh inning stretch if you like.
You gonna sing?
Ricky is.
Is there a game tonight, Bill?
I want everybody to stay here.
That's why I'm here.
If he sings, would that be like being rickrolled?
No, tomorrow night in
Sorry.
Hanover.
Naomi, was that helpful?
So,
No,
no, I
no,
did,
no,
I
no, no.
refereed a doubleheader at the middle school earlier.
Oh,
And they get yelled at.
how's that, how's that, how's that middle school team?
School teams.
Yeah. No? Okay, thank you, so noted.
No, the boys.
Are you telling me?
Anyone come? Yeah, you can't publicly say that.
I'm sorry,
They-
Chris.
they play
Please
hard.
go back to what
They
you
play
were
hard.
saying.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Unsuccessful today, but they play hard.
Okay. Just that I think we need to ratchet down at least 0.5% or maybe more on the proposed. And I was looking at where I circled things. Just off the top of my head while you were waiting, found 5,500. Mostly things that weren't expensed last year. That, if we can do without them for 1 year, take them out. Because they were put in, and some of them were put in with more, even though they weren't expensed last year.
Do you have them with you, Chris, so you can go off by numbers for us?
Well, I do and I don't. Off the top of my head, no, but I found a number of them in the police budget. There was I don't remember what the name of it was, a kids juvenile program or something that they didn't even use the money last year. And just a little, shave a little here, shave a little there.
Yeah, I think those would go back to what, when
Yeah.
we started this discussion, Bill's comment about how much shaving do we want them to do and then let them do the shaving.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Well, while I agree with you, we did say Megan could shoot her comments to Tammy, because she's not here tonight. Tammy has made a list of comments.
Well, Megan made a list of comments.
Sorry,
Megan.
I'm reading your name.
Tammy's
I brought it with me.
You're a dual personality tonight. Do you want to read those out, or do you want us to just make a copy and give it to you?
If you wanna share the copy, you don't have to read it, Tammy. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
It's entirely
But
up
it's
to
up
you.
to you. In the essence of time,
She's brought up some interesting things regarding FICA and,
Right, she says that you're overestimating FICA across the board for all of the town employees. I don't know. If there's,
0765?
How can we calculate? Should give you an
it's,
example.
no, it's just a comment, it doesn't have,
Tammy, can Naomi just go make a couple copies?
could you make copies for every one of us? Would that be,
Just so we can follow?
that is a great suggestion, Donna, because I'm leaning here over here.
And then Naomi can follow. Yeah.
So, Neil?
Assuming that the budget is approved at 382, the percentage increase in taxes is 14.3%.
For everything, or,
All the articles that you voted yes on, excluding
Okay.
anything that was 50/50 and excluding anything that was no,
We're looking at what?
a 14-point-something% increase. If in fact you have if you went as low as the default budget, that would be,
I'm not to burst this bubble, but I get 16%, not by the same game, so it's pretty high.
the number.
We'll get
My
there,
my
I
assistant
promise.
here did the addition twice, and she confirmed,
I did it like 10 times.
twice, let's go with it.
so you've approved.
Are
with
you
the-
using modern math or fingers and toes?
Fingers is pretty high. So
Everyday
14,
math
Bill?
accounts.
While you're doing that,
He's
doing
and I could probably get a clarification from who's coming back in. Something stuck in my mind, and I don't know how it impacts this. We're going on the numbers,
13.36, 13.4.
the numbers that are provided, but the revenue estimated coming into the town
Is
this
low.
year is, Beth does that, and it's very low, because she doesn't want to overestimate the revenue. But when you look at the difference between estimated revenue this year versus what they got last year, the difference is $600,000. And if you end up getting the amount of revenue that you got last year, that's 600,000 less that you have to raise in taxes
Which
unless.
impacts the tax rate, but doesn't impact the budget,
Correct.
the spending.
Yes.
Yeah.
Impact, it does, yeah.
I was given spending.
Ricky, you had your hand up.
I guess I just wondered, I mean, if it's the entire, or is it just the ones that are tax impact, or, because the fire department ones aren't tax impact, so I just make sure those were.
Correct. No, if it has zero impact, he's just looking at where the money's going. And, go ahead, Neil.
If you, with all the articles that you approved, plus the regular budget,
This is just the town.
just the town.
Okay.
And just for the town, and I'm comparing tax rates.
Thank you.
Current tax rate is $4.19. If you did everything you wanted to do, it comes up to $4.75. That increase is 13.4%. If you went with the default budget at $362, the total increase is $4.55 divided by 419 gives you an 8.6% increase. Those are the range that you have. So
Difference.
if you cut a few dollars from the proposed budget, and you're somewhere in between, then you're going to be 9 or 10 or 11%, depending upon how much you cut.
Next week, we're going to need you to do this for the schools.
I've done it for the
Right there.
schools.
I know, but with everything we ratified, we
did.
need to know what we've ratified, what the damage is, and then to see whether we can continue to ratify it or.
What you've done on the schools will add $367 to the tax bill on a $250,000 house. That's the two schools together only.
300,
367. It's a 5.96% increase. Schools only.
So that's 367 above and beyond, that's not a zero base,
No,
that's.
if last
Yeah.
year they were paying. They were paying $5,758 in taxes at last year's tax
Okay,
rate.
so it's added to that.
This adds 367 to that.
Okay.
Oh.
And if you were to do the default budget, I'll
okay,
figure that out in a
terrific,
minute.
thank you.
With all the warrant articles you approved. Let's say 455.
Okay, so are we clear how much damage we've done to this point?
You could look at it as how many needs we've met.
I'm looking at what people can afford, and I don't think we have addressed that appropriately. That's my personal opinion.
What would it be without the bond?
Is there a target you're looking at?
There's no impact.
If you give me 24 hours to sit and look at this, and
I mean, as a consensus, it doesn't mean just you, that's a consensus. Neil just gave you between 8.6 and 13 point something.
Your tax rate next year, assuming all of these tentative decisions are implemented, and assuming the default budget, to show you the lowest possible number, the new tax rate would be $24.77 versus this 2303 now, and that's an increase of
24 what?
77.
Thank you.
7.55% in the tax rate.
Townwide?
That's town and schools, total,
This is 7, so-
assuming you had a default budget. If you go beyond that, obviously, it goes up.
And we've said a number of times tonight, different people have, that we've lived with default budget after default budget. And I would like to see us try to work together to have a proposed budget that can be passed. And we go back to some of the open comments that, like when Bill started here, what is there that, what amount could be taken out of there and and come to some balance without going all the way to the default budget.
I can't give you a percentage that I want right now. I am not comfortable with the percentage am not comfortable with the percentage we've approved for the school right now. I think it needs to come down. I think it's unrealistic, just in what I've seen on my 5 years on the Finance Committee and what the voters have voted in. I'm definitely not happy with a 13.4% increase on the town side. From what I've looked at the budget, like I said, there is a department that consistently has 100,000 over every year that is in that budget, and I'd like to see that curtailed because the other departments constantly have to pull from their departments to cover for them when we go to a default, but this department never really feels the pain because they have 100,000 in there, and it shows if you go through 2016, 2017, 2018, unless they've suddenly expended all this money. But, I mean, there's one line item where I actually asked, what is this for? And it says, well, that's for a new police officer. And I said, is that with the adding the 12th? And he said, yes. And my statement was, we added number 12 last year. We budgeted for number 12, so I wouldn't add number 12 to this year. So I have questions on this. And I look at different things. We're going to be getting a new police chief. I don't know when. I certainly hope that, we take in everybody's input on this because it's important that it becomes a good fit. But we have to lower the legal budget in our town. I mean, we got to do something about curtailing our lawsuits. We're off the charts with this stuff. But when I constantly see we've got training planned. Initially, it was because we were going to put 2 officers through training. Turns out they'd already been through it. But this year, with a new police chief, other than one particular officer has to get a certification this year, this new chief, whenever this person appears, that person has to get to know our department. The rest of our people have to get to know this person. There's going to be a lot of hands-on training back and forth. I don't know that we're actually going to be sending people out for training because there's going to be I would say there's going to be a lot of changes that are going to go in and out of this department. And when you're doing that kind of stuff, you generally, in a company, don't ship people out to training unless it's a major training, and we don't have any major trainings for any of our people coming up. I'd like to see some restraint.
I don't know how that any member of the Finance Committee can say that. That pretty much is, at the discretion of the police department and what the training is that's needed. I'm not arguing one way or the other dollar-wise on it, but I just think that there are decisions that are beyond what we should be making.
Will you feel to trust the Board of Selectmen? I'm the difference where I'm saying I'm looking at this budget and I'm telling them where I'm giving them my feedback on my personal opinion, and I look at that differently. And each person here can address that as they see fit. They can either say, let the Board of Selectmen roll with it, or they can say, I'd like to see an adjustment here. This is what this format is for, so that we give our opinions, because we haven't been able to do that. What they do with it is their business. But if Keith, says, oh, I trust him, let him roll, and Bill wants to say, well, no, and Bill has raised some questions in some areas. I'm raising my concerns.
What
As a member of the Finance Committee, I'm looking at dollars and cents. Dollars and cents make the budget.
I'm just really sick of always hearing the police department bashed.
I didn't even name
really
the
am.
department.
You talked about the new chief and whatever.
You talked about it hurting, and I think that's the wrong thing. If you're sitting there, I think you're looking at it financially, not to make somebody hurt. We've heard that before.
I mean, aside from the finances, we've come so far from where we were when, in so many areas with that department. And I'm just saying that, and I'm going to shut up about it because that's not the budget issue. But I am really tired of hearing that department bashed over and over and over again when there have been so many advances made in
Neil,
policies and everything else.
In the default budget, there is over $200,000 of reductions that were not taken. $92,000 of property insurance, approximately $38,000 of health insurance, and $77,000 in lease payments. These are monies that are in the default budget because they were spent last year, and it's legal to do so, but they,
That lease payment's not there, Neil.
Wait until he finishes.
77,000 is not there.
Naomi's correct about that. I apologize. That is wrong.
Thank you, sorry.
Nope, I appreciate that. So, $122,000 of insurance money that is not going to be, is in the default budget, but doesn't have to be spent because we have lower insurance costs. I understand why they're doing this, and considering history, I suppose it's a prudent thing to do, but it's the kind of thing that I think is disrespectful of voters when, in years when these costs go up, they're the justification for increases, but in years when the costs go down, the benefit of those is not passed on to taxpayers. The question is, what will it take to get this budget passed? And in my opinion, the only way that an operating budget will pass for the town is if the operating budget is substantially lower than the default budget. It's as simple as that. And there's a lot of money in the default budget at the current level, as I just suggested, at least $100,000 of money that is in there that they don't have to spend for this. There are a number of things that could be done. It's up to the selectmen as to what they want to do. If in fact they decide to take out the glass from the transfer station budget and the $42,000 for gravel road maintenance, I would suggest that leave at least $1 in each of those lines so that money could be transferred in during the course of the year if they wanted to do that. There are problems with the operating budget that go beyond numbers. There are at least 3 salaries that stick in people's craws because of what the selectmen have done in overpaying these folks, or the Board of Fire Wards. There's also the fact that fire wards have put money into the operating budget for their increases, whereas the other folks have to have a special vote on these, like the DPW. Frankly, in a properly designed budget, these salary increases would have been in the budget. Especially the animal control officer. This is a normal budgetary thing. But I appreciate the fact that the chairman of the selectmen has said we want to give voters choices. And there's something to be said for that. But the net effect of that, of course, is to have your cake and eat it, because you then have a reduced operating budget. Summary, if in my view, if this budget is going to, if the operating budget is going to pass, it has to be lower than the default budget. Otherwise, there will be another default budget.
I agree.
We did that one year.
What you're saying is
It was
absolutely
awful.
impossible.
I'm sorry?
What you're saying is impossible, Neil.
It isn't.
Of course it is.
You don't, Tom, there are different ways to run the town, and there are different level of services that can be provided, and different quality of services. You and I probably disagree on that, but of course you can run this town for less than $6 million. And of course you can run this town for a lot more than $6 million.
Keith, did you want to weigh in?
Well, that was gonna be my point as well, and to go one step further, if you want your proposed, if one of the important points you want to achieve, which Thomas raised, is that your line items line up with reality. In other words, you're paying somebody X, but the default budget shows X minus something because you're still paying them X. But your proposed budget would show X. Then if there's a benefit to that on its own, I agree with Neil, that the only way to get that proposed budget passed is that it's not any greater than the default budget. And I think that would also do you well. First of all, you'd be more likely to get the other warrant articles. And second of all, you get people voting in favor of a proposed budget. And it might get you thinking the same way the following year in terms of limiting your increases to get people in the mode of voting for proposed budgets.
I would interject that I think the budget could go up from the default, but just not in a large quantity. I think we're asking for a large step at this point. If we could bring it down so that it goes up, I mean, I don't have a number, but, you know, it could go up a little bit, but
I hear what you're saying. I think it's, at that point, I think it's more psychological.
well, it is psychological. Yeah, that's absolutely psychological.
But if they're too close, they'll say, oh, they could do it for
The
the
default.
default budget, because it's so close to the proposed. So it's
I-
a weird.
That's what I said with the schools.
Go ahead and say that.
No, I just said that, what Sue just said, I said the same thing last night with the school budget when I said I didn't support the proposed budget, because it's only 100,000 different than this. So that's the same.
But they have a history of large surplus too, so it was a double.
Well, yeah.
This is pretty easy.
I think it'd be nice if we had some real honesty in budgeting here, and I'm not suggesting it's not. Honesty is the wrong word. If we had more,
Well, may I,
consistency, maybe you could help me out. The idea that the operating budget shows a decrease, and that's not reflected in the default budget, it puts people ill at ease. I mean, if they say they're not going to spend this much money next year, then why in the default budget do they have the higher amount? The school, as I've said before, the schools have adopted a policy of placing the lower of the two numbers in the budget. I'm not sure that's done 100% of the time, but it's done largely.
They don't.
Have you looked at their item?
Some of the items are driven by IEPs, and
That's
special
right,
ed,
and-
which is a black hole, because nobody can get that information, so
Right.
you have to take their word for it. But there are line items, I pointed out last night, that
But the line items
Supplies.
are arguably like special ed, something where it's a mandate, and they have to put in the higher item.
not always, though. Well, I had a list, I'll clean it up and give it to you.
Good.
Yeah?
If in fact the schools are not doing that, they should be.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
I agree with you there, I don't like that practice.
I was just going to, perhaps to clarify that statement just a little bit. There are some lines that, in the budget, that are consistently underfunded. I would like to see those actually more, accurately represented. I know a lot of it's estimate, and you can't say for 100% sure, but if there's a way we could increase those so that they're more accurate by decreasing some other ones and making those a little bit more accurate as well. I know it's all bottom line. I know the money's going to get spent. It's the same money, but if there was a way we could just make certain lines, or if we can make all of them a little more accurate as best as possible, I would like to see that as a part of it. I would love to see. I'd love to see again, I'd love to see monies coming out of it. I don't know where to do that. As was mentioned to the school board, it's like to say what are the big ticket items that we absolutely need this year compared to some of the ones that, well, we would like to have a little extra training. And working in the in different companies, training has always been a line item that pretty much gets zeroed out almost every year. But then we find the money for training.
We asked the schools what they wanted. What was most important to the schools? And they said the teacher contract. And I know that these warrant articles are based on all different people, but I would love to hear from you guys what's most important on your list to get passed. I'd like to hear your philosophy of what you think is important. I know you put everything on the warrant articles. I understand that. Me, I'd like to hear what you think if you had to really cut down to try and find something, a meeting ground, what's most important on your guys' list?
Are you referring to the operating budget, or are you referring to the town warrant?
Both. Because that's what we asked the schools, and they said, I want a teacher's contract, so I'm going to cut the crap out of they cut 300 and some odd thousand out of their budget. They came down to a 1.1%. Where?
Where school?
Yep.
They also operate on a larger sum than we do.
I realize
I'm
that.
just gonna stop talking because I'm gonna say something I'm gonna regret and it's gonna be used against me and I'm not gonna do that. So I'm gonna decline comment.
Okay.
I'm gonna be blatant honest.
Any other questions, comments,
Well,
feelings?
comment, I totally disagree that we've got to have a proposed budget lower than the default budget. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work because of a number of things, especially the whole issue of contracts that came up over the last few years. The board has contracts, they have to meet those obligations, whether it's a salary issue with a particular person, or whether it's lawn care, or whether it's a hauling contract for the transfer station. The board has to enter into those contracts, and now they cannot be put in the default budget, so they have to be passed in a proposed budget. If we never pass a proposed budget, but just keep on looking for a lower default budget, then we can't meet the obligations to do those things. So, you know, I'm perfectly okay with saying to the Board of Selectmen, we would like you to take your proposed budget and
We're here now.
come back with something that's X number of dollars lower, like was proposed here back 2.5 hours ago. But to say that you got to live on something lower than the default, to me, is just not practical at all.
I happen to agree with Neil. I disagree with your philosophy on things, and that's what we're allowed to do here. We're not going to go into the history of things, but I do not agree with how some of the things have done in the past that have now put us in a position that we're dealing with triggers that we have nothing that we can stop on some of these things, the contracts. But I don't see in the history that I've seen, I've looked at the budget, Chris gave me the list, and then I went back and looked at all the budgets. Whether you like it or not, the taxpayers traditionally, if they've got a small percentage that they're weighing at or a big percentage, they tend to go for the lower amount, right, wrong, good or bad. That's what they tend to do, and there is a lot on the table, and that's all I'm going to say is that there's a lot on the table this year. Go ahead,
I
Neil.
agree with that. Just focusing on the operating budget. An operating budget is the cost of running the town. And the cost of running the town is a fact. If there are a few places where we can shave some things off, then let's go for that. But you can't change the fact. This town has certain services that our voters expect to be delivered, and that's what's in the operating budget. So to go below default would be to say to the voters, we can't do what you expect us to do. That's just because of the money. We just couldn't do it. We've had that happen. One year, if I can find it, we went below default. Well, actually, it was at default level. 2006, the operating budget was amended to be at the default level. And we had had 7 defaults before that. And it was a rough year. It was a really rough year. So we've given the town, tonight what we've done is kind of given our impressions. We have a week to think about this before we vote.
Mm-hmm.
And the voters are going to tell us too. I mean, this is not the last word. We're going to hear at the deliberative, we're going to hear a lot. So this is no way carved in stone.
Anybody else got any feelings about this?
just some numbers based on what we've done. If you go with all the articles that we've approved, plus the default budget, tax increase is $437, and the percentage is 7.6% increase. If you go with the operating budget as proposed, the tax increase is $487, and that's roughly an 8.5% increase. Let me just say one thing about these. As you all know, we're doing this at a time of year when people are making major estimates on revenues. We can be pretty clear on the expenses. We may make a mistake, but we can be pretty clear on the expenses. But on revenues, it's really it's a bad time to have to make this decision because it's very early in the year. So most people, and the schools are very upfront about this, are very conservative in their estimates. So when the school gives us a number as to how much the budget is going to cost, they're assuming a very relatively low number of dollars of revenue coming in, so that means if little revenue comes in, you got to raise more in taxes. So their tax rates are higher. We voted not to put the $200,000 into the John Stark Equipment Fund. Okay. Kathleen, when she did the revenue estimates, put in that they expected to have a surplus of $200,000. Okay, that was the number she put in as the surplus. I don't know if the $200,000 that was we didn't vote for the equipment fund is in addition to that, and the $30,000 of the special ed is in addition to that they really expect and they're being conservative, or their total surplus at this point is estimated at $200,000. But they were hundreds of thousands of dollars below what they actually got in the prior year. Now come October, and they have more up-to-date figures, maybe that number will be substantially higher. The same thing is true of the town. We have very conservative revenue estimates here, $2,888,000 or something, and in past years we've had $3 million and change.
No, yes, about a $600,000 difference. So I think is what Beth said the other night. She said she wanted to do it lower. $600,000 difference from last year.
And that would make a world of difference, as you know, in these numbers. The problem with that is that we can't really consider that. So when the numbers come out in the fall and they're very different, as they will be from what we're doing today, don't think that we made mistakes or we erred in some way. It's the nature of the process that the revenues are just not knowable at the time we have to make decisions. And we use our best guess, and appropriately, Beth and Catherine are being conservative. You certainly don't want to overestimate the revenues.
But that kind of brings up a point. We haven't really talked as a group about revenues, and I don't know what we can, but I just wonder, are there additional revenue streams that could be incorporated into the town, like impact fees for new development, things like that, just as an example.
The impact fees for new development are only for physical things, and they're one time.
One time, yeah.
So the road, you can't assess a developer $1,000 per student per year for each child who lives in the development.
No, sure, right. You're not going to know that. No, but
So development fees are not going to be a substantial amount of money that would offset the budget. Moreover, almost always they have to be put in a separate lockbox and used to pay for the road, or used to pay for an extra lane, or whatever it is. So it probably wouldn't have a budgetary impact.
well, perhaps not that. But the other alternatives are, you either increase your tax rates and things to bring in more revenue, or you increase your tax base, either through new homes or new businesses.
So that's something, again, that we don't have a good handle on until April 1st, because it's the April 1st valuation of whatever is presently existing or new development that is used to base our tax rate on. It's the April 1st. What's the value of the town on April 1st? Now, I don't know. I think what that we've done here in the past is we take the present value, and for quite a few years we've added 0.5% to it. And that is the estimate of what the valuation will be on April 1st. Now, whether there's a given year when the building activity is greater and that estimate could be raised or not, but consistently the school district in the town has used the same figure, and for quite a while it's been a 0.5% increase over what the estimate was from the previous year. So that's built into that factor.
To James' point about getting more revenue, we have a basically moribund economic development committee that over the decades has tried to look at ways to bring in more business. For example, and has not been particularly successful. And people would love to have a nice supermarket in town, a good drugstore, Tractor Supply, Walmart.
Maybe not Walmart, but.
But none of these companies have found it in their economic interest to come into town on their own. And I don't know what kind of activity the Economic Development Committee could do to bring that in. I'm on the planning board, and we approve people who are coming in with commercial developments as long as they meet our requirements. In some cases, it's not popular, like that garbage transfer station that we approved.
Dover on Bean.
Or the storing, the safe store place opposite Langtot's. Prime site and a very low
Yeah, low
usage.
tax return.
Yeah, they don't have much there, but it's that or keeping it vacant.
I mean, we would have preferred to see somebody who was offering employment come in there, but it didn't work out that way, and they had the perfect right to develop it. But, you know, the thing with the revenues, too, there are unanticipated revenues that come in, but then they end up being a one-time. You know, the ones that we count on are, I'm sure, already on the list. And if something comes up during the year, for example, sometimes we've had FEMA emergencies and we've got reimbursed for that, and that goes in as a unanticipated revenue, but it's a one-year thing. The sale of that fire truck went in as a revenue one-time thing.
And again, we're only talking one time. I mean, it's like the rest of us. We need to make sure that our income is sufficient as households, but also as a town. And towns can't really go out and find a new job, but they have,
I mean, I know
increase
people get all upset when we compare ourselves to other towns, but the reality is that I haven't done that this year, but in previous years, compared our tax rate, and it's the lowest. It's the lowest. This year, I haven't done that, but last year, every town around had a higher tax rate than us. Some way over what ours were, and some, $1, $2 or something like that. But we have by far been the lowest tax rate, and I would not be surprised if I did that research and found the same thing was true of 2000.
I don't mind having a low tax rate.
No, and neither do I. But I'm just saying that if we want the services, when we're not an extravagant town when it comes to providing services for, whether it's the library or the fire department. We've got a long-range plan for the fire department that was laid out for us, and we have to look at it seriously because, we really do have a Band-Aid approach there. So what are we going to do long-term? And we had it presented to us. And so we can say, well, I don't believe that. Or we can say, all right, let's try to fit it in. How much is it going to cost? Can we phase it in a way that the cost shows us gradual increases? But there are going to be increases. Police department, we have some very different views on that around the table, and so I'm not going to get into that. But
but even the police department has a plan. Whether we agree with it or disagree with it, they do have. He did come up with a plan where he would want to have more officers and things like that.
One other factor about increasing the tax rate is it affects affordability of housing. There's a direct correlation between a low tax rate and lower property values, more affordable property values. When you go for your mortgage, the bank is going to see, what the taxes are going to be, and that affects affordability and how much of a house you can afford to buy. If we were to significantly raise taxes in this town, I think house values would decline, because the affordability ratio has to be maintained.
I brought that up as an example, though. That's something that a town can do for raising, I don't think that's the best option. I would rather see the tax base expand, somehow.
That certainly is less painful for all of the people who can just afford their mortgages and their property taxes, and for whom a $400 or whatever it is dollar increase in property taxes will result in some difficult decisions.
I don't know if that would be setting aside more area for industrial parks like maybe or something. But
It's
some-
not the amount of land, Jim, because the problem is that the land that we have is not really being utilized. People are not knocking on our door saying, gosh, I want to put my factory in Weare. Gosh, I want to put my business in Weare. Hillsborough gets more of that because they're a market community. It's not just the population of Hillsborough, but all of the surrounding towns that feed into that. That's why they have a Shaw's and we don't.
Well, it's also geography, and we've gone through this
Yes.
a lot,
you
that
could come-
they are near east-west roads, they are near more direct current electric, so we're in a unique situation, but I think we're doing the best we can with
We,
what's here.
I don't know if we're sending the selectmen home with any better idea on the actual budget than where we started with. The warrant articles, I think we gave them a fairly clear picture, but I don't think that they have any picture when it comes to what the expectations of this group are in terms of the operating budget.
Does anybody want to make a
Well,
statement?
I think it's fair to say that it's fair to say that it would be more acceptable if it was lower than what it is today. Now, you got that much.
It'd be the best if it was below the default.
And I don't
Well, I'm
wanna
not
get-
sure we're all unanimous in that.
Unanimous on that.
No.
No, but the,
Oh, down is a consensus. like-
down is better. Down is better. But and one thing, I just want to throw this number out there. So when we say, the increase is going to be 14% or whatever, that's really a worst-case scenario if you only get the revenues that are
Yes,
projected.
correct.
Okay? I just want to just kind of say, well, the other example would be, so we're somewhere in between. The reality will hit in October, whatever, at some point. If you took last year's revenue of the difference being 635,000 difference from what we got last year to what the projection is this year. If you took that and said, if we get last year's projection, that's going to bring that 24.77 that you said down another 74 cents. And it will bring it down to $1 over what it was last year, which is a 4.3% increase on the town side. So you're going to be somewhere between the 4.3.
Are you projecting revenues are gonna be higher this year?
No, I said the same revenue is what we,
Last year.
But the spending is going up 14%. The spending is the spending. If your revenues are
Okay.
gonna be about roughly the
I'm
same.
just, but I am saying that revenues affect what your tax bill is going to be.
Of course they do, but they have the same, unless you are arguing that revenues are going up more than they were last year, more than 14%. The ratios are the same.
Yeah, you're going to get a 4.3% increase on your taxes is what you're going to get.
How are you gonna increase spending by 14% and only increase your taxes by 4% unless your revenues are going up substantially more than they were this past year?
Bill, are you trying to argue that we should base our decisions on revenue, assuming revenues are going to be higher than the selectmen have assumed?
No, I was saying that the revenues, if we got the revenues that we got last year, this year, the year that we're going into.
It would have a much lower, anything we do would have a much lower tax impact.
Correct.
Clearly.
Correct. I'm just saying that don't lose sight of that.
But I don't know that that's a basis for us making decisions
Okay.
now.
Okay. Well, we have to use what the town gives us. I understand that.
And what,
I'm saying it may not turn out that bad.
That's what I was saying before. and I
It may
agree
not
with you
turn out
completely.
that bad.
I agree with you. And let's hope that's the case.
So do we want to give a tepid thought as to where we lie on this budget? For, against,
What we do
lower?
with the House Ways and Means, as done in the past, everybody throws out a number, we add them up and divide by the number of people.
Might not be an all bad
I
idea.
don't have enough input to that.
I'm sorry, I mean,
Well, we scheduled this meeting 24 hours after the last one, and I hadn't really gone through line by line by line by line. So it'd be premature for me to say anything. Just let them shave it down, I think.
But I think that they would be able to put a more logical train of thought in it if we said, like, again, I'm not holding Bill to that number, but he brought out like a $60-some-odd thousand number at the beginning of our discussion tonight. And if we said, shave 65,000 out of it, then they could go back and work on that 65,000. There is a line in there, like we voted to, not voted to, but straw vote to back the hiring of the 2 full-time firemen. And that meant that right away there was a $39,000 reduction in the operating budget to factor in. So if you take that and go from there, and what more than that do we want to see that may be practical for the board to go through and try to shave out of it? I mean, I think to not give some kind of a feedback that has a dollar a town, it doesn't really give them any direction. We know it's going to go down by almost $40,000 because of that change. If we hold to what we said about the fireman and figure that into his figures, then we've got $40,000, 39 something right out of that operating budget already. So, do we have a number we want to go with beyond that?
Neil?
The selectmen's proposed budget is $6,196,000. The default budget is $6,024,000. If the selectmen cut $200,000 out of their budget, hold on, it will bring it slightly, it will bring it the 20-plus thousand below the default budget, and it will be below $6 million. So a 599 something will appear there. Tom is right, there's $40,000 there. There's $42,000 in dirt. There's $15,000 in glass right off the top that can come out of that budget. Plus, since it's a bottom line budget, the selectmen don't have to, make policy decisions at this time as to which line is cut. Because if they cut line A, and in 6 months they feel that's not the right way to take it, they can change it. The point is they would be living within a budget that is now an adopted budget, and there are some advantages to some people for that. And it's the one that is likely to pass. And I don't think it's too difficult to take $200,000 out of that budget without a serious sacrifice or cut to the town services.
Isn't the crushing glass mandated by the state? So can we actually really do that? Take the 15 out of it?
Yes, because whether or not they have to do that, that was not in the budget previously. This is a new budget item, and it's not in the default budget.
But wasn't it on a different line?
Road reconstruction.
Road reconstruction.
They, in fact, instead of spending $480 on road reconstruction, we're now spending $480 plus 15 plus
Gotcha.
42.
Okay.
That's
understand.
the effect of
Yep.
what they've done.
Naomi, you were, please.
To go home pretty soon, I'm falling over.
I just got a little confused with 200,000. I thought we'd already taken the 77.5 out. You had mentioned in your calculations that there was 90,000 in insurances and 38,000 in health insurance and 77,000 in ambulance payment, but I already took the ambulance payment out.
That's in the default budget. You have those included in the default budget.
Right, but the 200,000, I thought that's how you arrived at that number.
No. This is a judgment call. I think that a default, an operating budget below the default budget will pass. That means cutting $200,000 out of the operating budget. Whatever is in the operating budget now, or whatever isn't, is your baseline. That's the $6,196,000. You can cut $100,000 out, as we just explained. That's easy. The next $100,000, I don't know what you would do as a policy matter, but in terms of presenting the budget to the town at this point, if you make decision A, you're going to reduce the police department budget and the fire department budget by whatever. You can always restore that money to the extent it's available at some later time when you're better able to decide what's necessary to be done. The other thing you could do, and I know the chairman probably doesn't like this, is to remove the $15,000 increase and the $10,000 increase that the fire boards put in their budget. And if they really think those two things are as important, then they'll have to find it within the remainder of their money. There are other, and if you don't like that idea, there are other things that you can do.
I think.
But if you, because it's a bottom line budget, Naomi, the real decision is, are we, the selectmen, willing to run the town in a different, more difficult way in order to have the advantage of having a proposed budget? If the answer is yes, it's easy to do. If the answer is no, then continue on.
Yeah, I just, we put default, I said Monday night. We've done exactly by the letter of the law because that's what we can do. And it's nice to subtract when we can subtract, but we have obligations that increase. For instance, dispatch is one this year that went up. So it's okay to put the lower numbers in, but we don't want a higher number when it comes to something you have to pay for too. So that's where I struggle, because there's certain obligations to haul the trash, for dispatch, for all these other things that have increased up. So that's okay for us to take away, but you don't want to go up either, and that's a juggling act, which you and I have had that conversation.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
That's a difficult position for the
That's
selectmen
very
to
true.
be in.
Yep. So
Absolutely.
it's tough, and to try to bring it below. And I'm not saying I'll look at it and I'll whittle. But there's just you back us in a corner so far, and I'm not going to stand here and say we're going to cut a service, because that's the worst thing you can do, and that's not. But you and I have had a frank conversation that what's it going to take laying somebody off, and that's not what I'm after either. But I don't know what the answer is, because I don't think there's $200,000 in the whole grand scheme of things. But I'm willing to look. I'm not going to say I'll come up with it, but I'm willing to look.
Bill, you had something you wanted to say?
No, yeah, I was just going to say the exam, and I think it was done. I think I brought it up earlier, where if you don't expect the positions to be filled in police, you're not going to have you're going to have a gap with a chief. I would
We
expect.
expect them to be filled. The expectation is to fill them.
It's always the expectation to fill them, and you have to. I know one year though we said, hey, it never ends up that way. And
Right, but the year that we had the big cut, and I'll just remind you, the year that we had the big cut, we had some delayed hirings. So instead of waiting till July, we waited till September. And again, I heard it again tonight, and I hate the phrase, is it got said to us, well, we figured out a way of working together to make it work, and that cut still exists today because we went back $108,000 at deliberative session on the floor. And that cut's never been brought back. But at the same time, it was, well, that didn't hurt. Well, I don't know that we're here to hurt anybody. And I just, and that just, again, you mentioned hurt, and that kind of just sets off a whole different flag,
I'm sorry. No, so I'm just looking in the police budget real quick. That proposed budget for full-time officers, that would be if you were at full staff for a full year?
Yeah,
Is
right
that-
now we have 2 in the pipeline that are moving through.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. So, but looking at the police overtime budget, I know this past year there was some, we don't get into issues or something through the
wouldn't-
summer that caused a tremendous amount of overtime because of some officers not being there. So that's what I understand that other number is. But, if we are full staff, is there a real need, like, I think that 115,000 is kind of padded if we're not at full staff.
Well, if you're not at full staff, overtime has to cover the shifts.
Right, but you're still getting paid for the full-time officers if it was the.
So
in
that line
budget.
stays the same.
That
and they
line
get paid
stays
out
the
of
same.
overtime. They get paid out of the overtime line. So if you look at the overtime the last few years, we've overspent.
Right,
But,
that's.
and I don't have to debate it, everybody's been here long enough.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just trying to get
My
clarification.
door's
I
always
just-
open, my
Yeah,
email's always
yeah.
open, my phone's always open. You know,
See, the
I'm not- I
expense, the expense should always be under the line where it's actually
Right,
expended.
which is why we
So that's
charge
why
it to
you'll see an
overtime.
overtime that's higher, and you should be the regular salary line lower to balance, not off, not exactly, but that's where it would balance out.
Yeah.
If in fact, the possibility of using part-time people, and one position vacant, there's some savings. It's possible there could be savings there. I do have one other question in code enforcement. I take it that the vacation bonus is due to the fact Chip is going to be leaving during
Yes.
2019?
yes.
Could you tell me why the health insurance went up and then also went up in the default?
Because we have an employee that had a family situation that changed and had to get on the insurance.
And why does that go into the default?
Well, we have to cover her. As an employee, she gets a buyout or the insurance. And because of the family situation change in open enrollment, she had to get on the insurance.
I understand that, but I don't understand why that goes in the default, is what I'm saying. I understand why you want to put it in.
It's mandated.
No,
Well, I
it's
think
not mandated.
as a full-time employee, as a benefit, we offer the buyout or the insurance. And if you have a life change, a circumstance change, during open enrollment, you can get on. If you had some disaster happen and life
No.
changes,
I-
that's what happened.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bill?
Just not to belabor the point, but, and not to get into specific line
Yeah,
items.
no,
I'm just looking at the money expended in the police department budget
yeah.
in 2016, 1.357 million. The next is 2017, 1.308. This last year, as of 20 December, 1.329.
Did you look at the 31st, though?
No, because I didn't have that information.
Okay, well, you have them now.
Okay, I got,
Yeah,
okay.
Yep.
And I'm looking now, saying 1.6 something. And if you're telling me that there's not money somewhere in that
Well,
budget.
the 1.6 has got the 3% increase that you voted on for the collective bargaining. All of them get a 3% raise.
Bill, according to the spreadsheet that we got, as of 12/31, the police spent $1,470,000 as against the budget of $1,490,000. 20,000 shot in the most recent year.
Okay. All right, then.
Yeah, no,
But
that's.
it is true that the budget is up, as are many departments, by over 70%.
And like I said, we haven't talked about it. Two of them have said here, we haven't, but I said I would trim. I mean, I'd look
Yeah.
to trim. Not that it's a guarantee, but I'll try.
Well,
Is the
you've got, Naomi, some specific suggestions that are
Yeah.
pretty
Yep.
pretty healthy amounts
Understand
to
that.
look at that wouldn't interfere with the, anybody's wages or salaries or anything, or insurance or
No, I
anything like
heard,
that.
I've heard, I've been thinking.
Maybe,
sure.
we take it from
We can
there.
try, that's all I can say.
Yeah. We have a couple of people not represented here tonight who are on this committee, and we have a spectrum of opinion on this budget, ranging from to cut it below the default, to cut it a little bit, to whatever else in between. So we're not unanimous on
Oh, yeah,
cutting
no,
it
no, I-
below the default.
Yeah, no, I understand that, I just appreciate your
Yeah.
input. I think at times we get carried away with comments, but that's.
And
okay.
I also do believe that if we did approve all the stuff that we talked about approving, the voters would still select the ones that they
Yeah.
wanted to fund.
At the end of the day, they're gonna be.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming tonight and your input and patience. I know it's been difficult at times, but I think it was an important discussion to have. It took a while to get there. But I think we all found this useful, and we appreciate this, and I'm really glad Naomi requested this. We have some business to clean up, please, Mr. Secretary. Minutes?
Oh, well, no, we'll do them, we'll be here next week.
Okay.
We badgered enough, I mean, no. Next week.
Just say no. We have a meeting next Wednesday at Thursday. Thursday at
7 o'clock.
Oh, my favorite show.
Motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Let's go home.